All right, I've got 6 o'clock. So we'll go ahead and call our regular session, December 20, 2016, to order at this time. First item that we have on the agenda this evening is the opening prayer and pledges of allegiance to the flags of the United States and the state of Texas. Councilmember Gutierrez will lead us in the opening prayer. If you'll join me in standing, please. Councilman?
Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. May we use only our best skills and judgment, keeping ourselves impartial and neutral as we consider the merits and pitfalls of each matter that is placed before us, and always act in accordance with what is in the best interest of our community. Thank you on behalf for all who are gathered here today. Thank you for your abundant and generous blessings. Thank you for life itself and the measure of health we need to fulfill our calling. Thank you for the ability to allow those who wish to be involved and the freedom to embrace it. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. Thank you for being our source of guidance today. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor.
All right, first order of business that we have this evening, we have city events and announcements, and we'll start with announcements of upcoming city events. And Mr. James, you're the only one I see when I look up, so you must have the duty.
Yes, I do.
Very good.
Just to let everybody know that ACOG, Alamo Area Council of Governments, has a program over the holiday, Alamo Call a Ride for Vets. That's on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. It provides free rides to eligible veterans and family members. They do need to pre-schedule rides, so folks can call 210-362-5245. Just as a reminder, city offices will be closed Monday, December 26th in observance of Christmas, and Monday, January 2nd in observance of New Year's Day. Lastly, Tuesday, January 17th is the annual State of the Chamber Luncheon. That's at the Civic Center at 11:30.
Thank you, sir. Next item, we have announcements and recognitions by the city manager, Mr. Kessel. Mr. Kessel?
Mr. Mayor, City Council, in keeping with the season, I'm going to pass around a little note and picture we received from Animal Control. It is a very cute picture of an Animal Control officer holding a pig that was missing, and our staff caught it. There was a very cute Christmas card made and sent, and so I wanted to give that to the City Council. Thought you might enjoy that.
Thank you, sir. All right, before I move on, I'd like to recognize two Boy Scouts that we have with us this evening, Jonathan Anderson and Christopher Anderson, both from Troop 512, and I guess you guys are working on your citizenship in community merit badges. Is that correct? Very good. Thank you for joining us this evening, gentlemen. And I'd encourage you to continue your trek in Scouts. Find your way to the Eagle Scout Award. It will serve you well for the rest of your life. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen. Photo. All right, the next item that we have on the agenda is a presentation, but we're going to hold off on that for a few minutes. Mr. Fowler's running a few minutes late. We want to make sure he has an opportunity to join us. Before I... Well, actually, on hearing of residents, Mr. Cantu, you've signed up regarding item number 6. Do you want to talk during the public hearing? Because I'm going to go ahead and move to that item. Okay, so let's do that. And also, Rosemary Hendricks and Patty Cullum, would you all like to speak during the public hearing on item number 6 or on the hearing of residents, or both? Okay, so I'm going to be moving directly to item number 6, which is a public hearing and looking at the moratorium, and then I will come back to the hearing of residents, and you have another opportunity. You have an opportunity at both junctures to address. All right, in that case, unless the council objects, I'd like to move to item number 6, which is ordinance 16S42, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, extending and amending a moratorium on both residential and commercial property development due to a shortage of essential public facilities generally in the area from Interstate Highway 10 to approximately 2,000 feet north of the Lower Seguin Road between FM 1518 and the western boundary of the city limits, providing a reversionary clause, providing a repealing clause, providing a severability clause, providing a penalty clause. I'm going to let it go. I'm not going to say anything about Santa Claus. And declaring an emergency and providing an effective date.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mayor.
James.
We spoke at this item at the last City Council meeting, just to remind folks in the audience. Back in August, the city imposed a moratorium on new development applications, so that prevented us from taking in new plat submittals, new building permit submittals in the moratorium area. Again, the issue we have out there, as you know, is a lack of fire protection. That's something that we've been discussing for some time. As you know, as a result of that, Council placed before the voters a year ago an item to fund a new public safety building, i.e. fire station in Southern Schertz. We've been subsequently moving forward on that. But the concern is that in light of the fact that we don't have that in place and the bond funds were just approved a year ago, and then the other factor is, as you know, for a number of years, we participated with a number of other governmental entities, an effort led by Bexar County that included Randolph Air Force Base, the cities around us, Guadalupe County, Bexar County, et cetera, and private entities, to update the joint land use study for Randolph Air Force Base. And as you know, that's done every few years. One of the issues when this update was done on the joint land use study is, as we began looking at it, there were concerns about encroaching development within the areas around base, both north of the base as well as south of the base, and that was a series of things that were of a concern. One issue that we had not referenced before had been the sound contours or the noise contours. Again, they were in the JLUS document. The city didn't really have regulations in accordance with that, and so that was one of the factors. But additionally, the big issue is that as we move forward, there were greater concerns as we started seeing development about the types of development that would occur, particularly south of Randolph Air Force Base. As you know, most of the area north of it is already developed, but south, again, generally is undeveloped. But as you can see, we've started since the previous JLUS having development. And in some of those areas that allowed single-family residential homes on half-acre lots, 2 units per acre. But again, I think what was probably anticipated when you read the documents was sort of scattershot little ranchette development, and not someone coming in with a subdivision of half-acre lots. By and large, we generally had not sort of really had that type of thing in Schertz. We've seen that there. We also saw Schertz Forest come in, and that posed a concern. Additionally, change conditions that the base is dealing with, or a greater awareness of those in terms of the bird strike hazards, posed a concern. So based on that, and then I think based on everybody, frankly, taking a step back and saying, if we started from scratch, you wouldn't necessarily put a lot of intense development down at the end of runways of any kind of airport, but certainly not one with the number of flights that this base has. Again, and some of the folks from the base can probably speak to that, more flights than San Antonio International Airport. And so we all know those issues going forward. So the concern that staff had, that we brought forth to council when we posed the moratorium, is in light of those additional hazards which create additional concerns and additional requirements to deal with those sorts of incidents, we needed to put a pause on taking new development applications to let us do a couple of things to basically move further to being able to provide appropriate fire protection for the area. So one step that we've been making, as referenced in the staff report and the ordinance, is moving forward to getting more fire protection down south. Again, we have an architect for the fire station. The bonds have been approved. We've issued some of those. We're in design. Staff is close to coming forward to you with a construction manager at risk recommendation who would then build the thing for us. You have an item on the agenda tonight to purchase a new fire apparatus, basically a big fire truck. with the budget amendment and to move forward in that in a timely manner. So we're moving that forward, which eliminates some concern. But again, we still need to deal with, frankly, this land use conflict so that we can decide exactly what types of facilities, equipment, training we need. And so, but what staff has done, though, is we're recommending tonight to pull back somewhat on the moratorium to reduce the area, as you can see, from going from the blue area to the purple area, and I'll explain that in a minute. Do an extension in the purple area for 120 days, but also exclude single-family homes on existing tracts of land. So if there's somebody out there that bought a piece, they've been waiting to save up money to come in for a permit on that tract of land, they can come and apply for that permit. We would accept it. But what it doesn't let us do is get a new major development coming in with a lot of subdivision plats, a lot of additional houses, till we make that provision to be prepared to move forward so we don't face that shortage. So again, I think that would address the folks who spoke last time. Again, one of the developments is outside of that area now. The other, again, it's an existing tract that they could move forward on. Again, we will move with all haste, but to be clear, frankly, what we're going to need to do, and this will be the difficult part of it, is move forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council on a comprehensive land use plan amendment, and then subsequently, if that were to make it through, zoning cases to deal with that in that time frame. And then based on that, before the moratorium expires, we know either we've mitigated some of those conflicts, we can proceed with more of a typical fire station, or that we need to make provisions to deal with some of these potential hazards based on the way development would go. So again, I don't want to get into that debate tonight. It's not on the agenda, it's just the extension of the moratorium, but wanted to walk you through that step going toward. I passed out a revised version tonight. It really just added a semicolon in the caption, and then again had all the attachments so you could kind of see a clean version of it. But again, it was what was discussed last week, and so with that, I'll stop talking.
All good. So following staff presentation, we have our public hearing. I would ask that anybody would like to address the council on this when you do come forward, if you'll state your name and your address for the record so that the city secretary can capture that. And we generally ask everyone to keep their comments to approximately 3 minutes. I've got a little bit of leeway here from the chair if you need a little extra time, but try to keep it to about 3 minutes. That said, then, at this time we will open the public hearing. Anybody that would like to step forward may do so at this time.
I don't know if 3 minutes apiece is going to be enough, so we'll try.
I am Rosemary Hendricks. I live at 3017 Turquoise in the Sedona subdivision. And my first question, or my first statement, I know that I have been up with your city numerous times, and I have been told that we knew a lot of this when we moved into our home. We've been in our home since 2009. I trust the city of Schertz that any homeowner does not have to go through the legwork I have had to go through to find out the situations I have on my home. The contracts I was given when we moved in did not even give us a hint of what was about to happen. In reference to this moratorium, I personally have a disabled husband. We have used the EMS. We know of the situation with the response time. When the moratorium workshop was put in place, my one question to y'all is why we weren't sent something such as the notice of public hearing, which we were sent on the planning. All of that property is included on this notice that we were sent about a PPD turning to a PPD. Not important. Our homes burning down is very important to us. The parts that we are including on this expansion is the new expansion that I want to also point out. Sedona once was the Sedona subdivision, and it went to Sedona Trails. It's Crossvine. The new blue area is including this Crossvine, which is supposedly what was a part of our original paperwork. If we go back through our original paperwork, which I have been able to go to some TIRZ meetings in 2009, planning and zoning minutes, the city council meeting. Numerous times it was brought up, further discussions about the property for the fire EMS and the city park, which before this was approved for our planning, our PPD was given, the property was deeded. What I would like to know, it's stated in many of these notes that the property was deeded for the EMS. What happened to the property that was deeded? And if that was part of our specifications for our subdivision to be built, why was it not followed up on? Where, if it's in all of the drawing plans that this was all supposed to be part of our subdivision, now we have all of this expansion. We're 169 homes. Besides our, which I'll bring up at the next issue, with the fact that these plans show that we were built on the 219 homes is what it was approved for. So even our sewer, everything was planned and accepted. But all of these plans now are, who follows up that the property that was deeded? Who follows up that we were supposed to have these amenities? Yes, we're in the flight zone of the Randolph. Those planes go overhead all day long. So God forbid an accident would happen. Our homes, they'd go up like wastewater. I mean, the kindling out there is immense. There's open land all around us. So please consider what happened to these plans. What plans are we to follow and to look for? And so in this discussion on the moratorium, I realize there's people that have bought land down there by the Schertz Park or forest. I feel sorry for them. They do not know about, they don't have the fire coverage to build their homes down there. So I know that hopefully, I think the sewer is a different time, right?
Actually, we should go ahead and give your friend a chance to speak as well. And we'll come back for hearing of residents generally after we complete this item.
Okay, because my problem is the lack of sewer and utilities, the infrastructure that we have.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
you can take 3 minutes now, and you can each have
Okay.
3 minutes when we go back to hearing residents.
All right, the problem is where
Excuse me.
we live.
Can she state her name for the
Oh,
record,
I'm
please?
sorry.
please.
My name is Patty Cullum. I live at 9025 Peridot in the same subdivision. I also bought my house in 2009, and for quite a while, they had to come and pump out manholes every day to keep our sewer going, so it wouldn't back up into the homes. The other 2 weeks ago, when we had all that rain, or last weekend, the sewers backed up again, and in yards. Our problem is, our subdivision is 168, the Vines is 120, they're getting ready to build 120 homes, plus 81 homes across from us, and our infrastructure does not support all these houses. But somebody keeps building and building. I have a concern about not having the sewer, the water, and the worst part is our lighting is absolutely horrible. I'm not surprised there's not more accidents than they have in the area. My insurance, my car insurance went up because that area has a high accident rate. So I asked my insurance, why is my insurance? Because I moved from my San Antonio home back into my Schertz home. And she said, because of the accident rate in that area, which really took me by surprise. But my concern is a lack of infrastructure for where we all live now with the current residents and building another 200 homes. What's that going to do? Because we know right now the lift station is at capacity. So if it's at capacity, why build another subdivision if it can't support, the infrastructure can't support it? I think that people who want to build a single home further down the road, that's a good thing, but building a whole nother 200 homes without having sewer, water, lights, it's just not good for the residents right now. And I've talked to a lot of our residents, and there's quite a few who oppose the 81 garden homes to be built. So I still don't understand why it got approved. I had another one of my neighbors who shook her head. What are they going to do when we get another rain and our sewer backs up again? And it's not just in houses, it's the yards. It comes up in the yards. So I'm just at a loss at why we don't have another, and I think you're looking at one. But don't you think the infrastructure needs to be built before you build another 200 homes?
Yes, thank you.
So that's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to address the council on this issue here in the public hearing? Please, Colonel.
Mayor, Mr. Kessel, councilmen and women, thank you for letting me come and speak to you and the ladies and gentlemen from the city of Schertz and the surrounding area. I'm Colonel Joel Carey, the commander of the 12th Line Training Wing here on Randolph Air Force Base, part of Joint Base San Antonio Randolph. And on behalf of the men and women of the 12th Line Training Wing, which constitutes the majority of the flying operation in and around Joint Base San Antonio, thank you for your continued support. Currently, Air Force men and women, our sailors, Marines, airmen, and soldiers downrange are currently benefiting from students that came through the 12th Line Training Wing as recently as several months ago. They're currently protecting our national interest downrange in hostile places around the globe. And we know that our operation here at Randolph Air Force Base could not happen without the support of the men and the women here in the Schertz area and our other surrounding partners around our neighborhood. So thank you for that. Also, thank you for the councils and also other leadership that has been involved, part of the joint land use study, and bringing together a coherent approach to how we can bring not only our mission but also development in the communities around us together in a way that's we can make sure that they're compatible with our mission, that we identify potential risks that we have been operating under and future risks, and make sure that we go into a manner of accepting those in a way that makes sense and that is transparent as best we can for the men and women of our community. So again, thank you. I look forward to continued work between the base and this council and our community in ways that we can approach this smartly, and I look forward to that in the future. So thank you.
Hey, Colonel. Anyone else would like to address the council? Mr. Cantu.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Bob Cantu, 2512 Jane Adams here in Schertz. The reason for me to be up here today is I submitted a plat, or I had a plat submitted. Unfortunately, in no fault of the cities, it got here 1 week after the initial moratorium was established back in August or whenever it was, as I talked to Brian James on it. The reason I really want to come up here is just to try to highlight a little bit about what it is that I'm asking for and how it works. In about 1971, I bought 18 acres. As it turned out, in 88, I bought 23 more that were adjacent to those 18, so I have approximately 40 acres. Also in 88, as it turned out, I sold 1 acre. I think I said I sold 1 acre, negotiated by a city guy named Donnie Beerswell. I sold 1 acre to the city of Schertz for that 500,000-gallon water storage tank that is now sitting on that 18-acre plat. I have worked that land. The cattle just messed with it, done whatever I do with it. But more recently, I have 3 daughters. That's my problem. But my 3 daughters would like to have a place to build. One for sure would like to build out there. One, maybe, she's a school teacher. She probably can't afford it. And the other one I know does not want to do it at this time. That's not important at this time, but that's what I'm trying to do. My request would be to plat that 40 acres into 3 sections of land, a 3-acre plat on the 18, 2 2-acre sites on the 23 acres. realizing that I'm asking, in fact, for 3 dwellings, 3 homes, or if potentially, I don't know if it'll ever be there, but at least 3 on a 40-acre tract. I think that kind of complies with the spirit of the J-Lou study, which I'm a little bit familiar with, and that is in that particular area, it's just recommending 1 per 10 acres. That's probably where I'm at right now. I just want to make that plea and hope that perhaps we can consider these things as separately and maybe not. And if we can do that, then maybe we can move forward with the plating of these 3 lots. I realize in speaking to Brian that, you know, I and others have to be kind of considered as a developer. I don't consider myself a developer, as we are talking about developing a whole bunch of property. But I do consider myself as an individual who is trying to just put together something there that would allow my kids to at least build a home potentially. Don't know that they ever will. And so that's where I just hope we can work something that can kind of move forward, and ask you to put consideration on that. And I'm happy to answer any questions later on or whenever the time is right. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to address the council during this public hearing? Appearing that there are no takers, go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back over to Mr. James and then to the council. Anything else that you'd like to add?
Would you like me to respond to kind of some of the comments or offer up some thoughts on those?
I think I'd appreciate that if you would.
Sure. So certainly, I think, let me go back to the .chem, and I think Mr. Cantu gave an accurate summary, and again, probably give you a heads up of some of the work we have before us going forward as we look to find an appropriate balance between the operations at Randolph Air Force Base and the property owners out there. And I think part of what the effort will entail, as I said, didn't want to get in because that's a separate effort, is see if we can find as flexible as possible a way to implement what's in the Randolph J-Luce. And I think that, as we've talked about with the council that have been here before and the planning and zoning commissioners before who've been on there, it's one thing to craft an ordinance that literally describes something, but then unfortunately people find a way to do something that's not consistent with what the goal was behind that. At the same time, you don't want to hang folks up unnecessarily because that's the letter of the law. And again, I think what we saw as we went through the J-Luce effort was really, if you allowed folks to come in with the half-acre lots, line them up as they do at Laura Heights, that's the problem. And so again, while the J-Luce may be crafted as minimum lot sizes, I will say that what was really behind that was to avoid a particular situation. And so there may be some things that we can do to find a way to strike that balance so that, again, a person may offset some of the smaller lots with larger lots, and if they're located in a way that doesn't create multiple houses in a row, there's a way to get to it. We won't know that till we go through that effort, though, frankly, so I don't want to get up here and imply anything and promise. I will say that Mr. Cantu's property is in the area between the 2 APZ zones. The reason that was included at lower density, as you can imagine, is it becomes problematic in a lot of ways to have significantly lower density areas than higher density areas in between, both for traffic, services, et cetera. So I will say I think we probably have the most flexibility there. To jump to the comment from the woman, when we go through those exercises, all of the different owners of property will be notified of those hearings going before the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. And so that's where the real discussion will start with property owners, and they'll find out. So the notice requirements are different. We'll be able to hear those concerns, work with everyone, see if we can craft some ways to find some compromise. But I will be clear, we won't be able to do that with everyone. This will be a difficult thing that significantly impacts folks, and you will have strong opinions on both sides going forward. So I will offer that. A couple things with regard to Sedona, if I wasn't clear. Initially, we used a big brush, took in the area in blue. Subsequently, at this point, we're pulling it out. So the initial Sedona phase is right in here, so it will no longer be covered by the moratorium. I will point out that it's not in the flight path per se. Planes may fly overhead, but it's not in the ACUs, which is the clear zone, APZ1 or APZ2. It's outside that area. That's why there's a concern. A couple of the other things I will say, the city does, in fact, the developer did transfer a tract of land that back when the TERS came about, and the development came about, that we thought would be a good location for a new fire station. As we move forward and as growth has happened, it is not a good location for a fire station. We feel like we have found a better location that serves everyone. So yes, the developer did transfer that to the city. The city does have it. But again, as often things change, the circumstances change, and we don't want to settle for that. So we're looking to find a better location for that going forward, to be clear. The last thing I'll say is, again, with regard to sewer capacity out there, part of what the city tries to do is stage the infrastructure as it's necessary. In fact, you have another item, a couple of developments agreement with the developer of Homestead, and to some degree I'd say there's some similarities there. It's a partnership with the developer to put infrastructure in just as it's needed. So again, we don't want to go out and build stuff too long and have it sit. We want to time it appropriately. Certainly, sometimes we miss the mark. As I've said, part of that goes to risk. If you have the ability on sewer to do pump and haul, there's a way to overcome any delays that might go forward. I will say that I think what's happened most recently, checking with the Public Works folks, is unrelated to a lack of sewer capacity. It seemed to have been an equipment failure associated with that. And I'll be blunt, that can happen at any point. We heard that with regards to the woman Hollering Creek, and you heard staff say, yeah, we're going to have that stuff. It will happen on occasion. So certainly we can touch base with those residents, talk about what we're doing to correct it. And again, we are working to have capacity in place to allow that development to occur. And so, no, there isn't a concern that we're going to have a problem in the immediate future because of that. It's, again, a timing circumstance. But to be clear, the area is being pulled out of the extension of the moratorium. It's outside the APZ. And again, with regard to fire protection, you know, as we started to get a little bit of development, folks, I think, kind of know, hey, I'm moving out. There's not a lot of development. There's not a lot of other folks out here. It's going to take longer for city services to get here and to occur. But as time passes and they see more and more development, I think reasonably so, they have an expectation that the city will keep up with that infrastructure, provide it in a timely manner. And so again, that's what's happening here now. Don't disagree that in hindsight we'd all like that infrastructure to get in as soon as possible, but part of it is a funding issue going forward. So again, I'm not necessarily sure the issues that were expressed directly relate to the moratorium per se. It's on fire protection. If there's sewer capacity issues, that's not a function of the moratorium, not something that we necessarily are doing as part of this, but can certainly have those conversations.
Thank you, Mr. James. All right, council, questions? Mr. Thompson.
Mr. James, last week a developer had come and mentioned that there is, if I remember correctly, about 223 acres that there was a pond on. Where on this approximately is that located?
Sure. That property is located down in this area, sort of.
Dr. Kaiser?
Just kind of a comment. You know, Rosemary Hendricks had brought up about, you know, going back and looking at records from 2009. As a homeowner, if I were out there, I'd be frustrated as well. And you said that the property had originally been deemed, you know, for that. You've changed that. I think it would probably be a good idea to notify residents when, you know, the city and the staff changes something. You know, send a notice to them so that she knows what's going on prior to getting a public hearing, and you know, and she's having to go do research over the last 7 years. So just to comment on that, let the residents know, you know, somehow get it to the residents that are affected with that.
Yes, ma'am. Understood.
Mr. Edwards?
Last week I brought up the information. I was asking the question is, can we take this case by case? Or is there any legal problems?
Yeah, staff would recommend that we not. I think that what we'll find is that everyone comes forward with a case where we're all empathetic about the circumstance, and to some degree I think that becomes problematic for us to do that going forward. Again, I think the changes we're making tonight reduces the area, so again, fewer property owners will be impacted. Again, the change to allow the existing or the single-family homes on existing tracts will deal with that person that may have purchased a piece of land and just piece of property and wants to build one house on it. Again, there are others that will get hung up, but again, at this point, to be perfectly honest, I don't recall outside of Mr. Cantu other folks who we've told the moratorium is in place, they were trying to submit a development application. And so my expectation is, yeah, we'll probably have somebody come in while we're moving through. But again, at this point, we need to take action to deal with the situation in the next 120 days. And so again, while it's a period of time that delays folks, it's a finite period of time, and then at that point, we can all move forward based on whatever may change.
Others, counsel?
Mr. James,
Crawford?
Yes, sir.
did I understand this right, that this is just an extension of the existing document?
It's an extension of the moratorium, but it also, when it extends it, it reduces the area from the blue to the purple and then allows an exception for single homes on existing tracts of land.
And will there be further guidance on the exception for the single homes where it can be discussed and worked out for the folks that came tonight and other people too?
Yeah, we were not planning to. Again, those folks can come in and talk to staff.
Okay.
If they meet that exception, we'll move their application through. I think certainly for the folks who have been delayed back there, we will work to expedite their permit as quickly as we can to make up for some time.
There's nothing formal in place that they can read or look at now. It's strictly a one-on-one, come visit and get it sorted out.
No, it's referenced in the proposed ordinance, so the
Yeah.
proposed ordinance makes that exception. I think the language is fairly straightforward and clear. We didn't want to
Right.
overcomplicate it, but we can walk them through it.
But it's not a problem to work with each one as an individual.
No, sir, no. We will continue to do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Thompson?
Just to clarify, you've mentioned that individuals who have bought already single or plots can build a single home, go forward with it, but this would not, someone who wants to purchase a plot would not be able to.
No, let me be clear. I probably was not as specific as I should be. So, and again, I was probably overly broad. And I'll try this without having the city attorney groan and correct me. Again, what we would still not do is accept a subdivision application within the moratorium area. So if somebody wanted to come in and purchase a portion of a tract of land, which under state law would have to go through the platting process, we would not accept that plat application. But if someone went out and purchased a tract of land, all of a piece of land, didn't require platting, they could come in, or again, frankly, with the exceptions under state law to the platting requirement, if they purchased that, then we would treat it as such.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Crawford?
we do have people that are already grandfathered in there, correct?
We do have people whose plats have already come in,
Right.
and when the property is filed, we'll issue those permits, yes, sir.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that was clear on that.
If there's no one else, is there a motion with regard to ordinance 16S42?
So move, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
On the public hearing. Yeah, we closed the public hearing. I have a motion from Mr. Edwards and a second from Mr. Thompson to approve ordinance 16S42. Other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
7 ayes and no nays, the motion carries. We'll move on to the next item. We're going to move back to the front of our agenda at this time and move to a presentation. And it is item that is listed as presentation and recognition of the Love Where You Live volunteers. So, Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Fowler.
Correction, I appreciate it. Did you get that? Well, a show and tell. Takes about 2 minutes. I think you're going to find it very interesting. First of all, let me just say, as you're looking at the slide presentation, the certificates that we have here reads basically certificate of appreciation. This certificate is presented to, and we have about 10, 14, 15 different organizations we want to recognize. But it reads this way: in acknowledgement for your support of Love Where You Live, the city of Schertz, and all the area neighborhoods that came out and volunteered their services in support of the October 22nd, 2016 Community Cleanup Day of Mobile Village. So, these certificates, whenever I talk about people that came out, I want to say that these different commercial companies that came, that they supported not only the effort, but they supported the individuals that came. We had families that came out. We had individuals that came. So you were really supporting them to do a job for the whole city. So it's really a pleasure for me to stand up here and say, wow, what a turnout, what an event, and how everything integrated together gave us a great success in this cleanup effort. So I'd like to just, when I call your organization, we'd like for you to come up here so we can get a picture of the whole group. And we want to start with AgPro. If y'all would come up here. How do you get that out of there? All right, B&W Landscaping. Brake Check. Cibolo Valley Baptist Church. This is all done in, is that it? Chick-fil-A. GE Oil and Gas. Got two there? Okay. Lowe's. Mama Margie's. Northeast Bible Church. Remax from Schertz. Okay. Robles Services. They had a great effort in demolition. They knew how to do it. The Schertz Methodist Church. United Methodist Church. The Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. Oh. He said they were going to be here. Yeah. And presentation to the Veteran Services. We have one more. After recognizing that we have the commercial and we've had churches working together of different denominations, and to me, I think that's important to say, you know, churches can work together even though we don't think alike. This presentation is to the Schertz Public Works. So if you guys want to come up, let me tell you, we cut more trees and piled them up they had a hard time chipping all of the stuff that we were giving them. In fact, they had to come back Monday after we did the work on Saturday to clean up because it was done so well. And with all the help we had from the people that was out there, about 150 total. So the coordinated effort and the people that called and have responded just said, we like doing this. And even the people that, like you guys, I'm sure you were tired and you would wish the trees wouldn't come and the trash that was being picked up. We picked up a lot of trash. But overall, I believe that when you went home, you realized there was a great job done. And it was a great job for the city of Schertz. There's one other person I would personally like to recognize. That's Jesse. He's been my Schertz city counterpart. And believe me, he put his whole heart and soul into making this happen. It made it a lot easier for me, but it could not have been done without his coordination and the phone calls that he's made and helping to get these certificates made up. And even those people were not able to attend and may have been on no Christmas vacation, we will make sure they get these certificates because we want them to know, like all the people that was served with Chick-fil-A and for Mama Margie's, how much we appreciate the entire effort and the area that we cleaned up and did minor maintenance on. How much these people appreciated what we did. It was beyond what their expectations were. We hope to do this again, probably in the springtime. So don't let your tools get rusty, because we think we got one we're working on. And so, Jesse, I'll give it to you. You can pass it on to. Thank you, guys.
If I may. Again, I would like to thank everyone that participated. And I would personally like to thank Mr. Fowler for, number one, having a compassionate heart to take on such a project like this. When he was a councilman, he came up with the idea of something to help his fellow neighbors. And from that first meeting that we sat down, and I think we called it the triad or something to that effect. So we worked through that, and now we proudly call it Love Where You Live Schertz. And it's something that we all affectionately take on and are proud of, that we are able to help each other as neighbors and those that are in need. And again, Mr. Fowler, we definitely thank you. Thank you for all that you've done, sir. Thank you.
While Chuck is assembling everyone for a photograph, for those of you that don't know, this group went out and cleaned up alleyways and lots, did minor repairs on homes, did painting, took care of structures that were imminently going to fail, a number of things for folks that had no other means by which to get those things taken care of. It was a true act of charity and a fantastic exhibition of cooperation from a lot of different folks. So just so that those of you that might not have been here for the previous presentations or seen the photos of the work that was done, I just want to give you a little bit of background. It's a remarkable effort. So while you're getting your picture taken, well, thank you guys once again. It's amazing, some of the transformations that we saw from your work. So well done.
Please. If we have a second, we actually put together a video that
Please.
sort of illustrates everything that took.
Much better than me trying to describe it. Excellent. Gotcha. Thank you. Very nice. Thank you all again. All right, we're going to continue with the agenda at this time and move to the hearing of residents. And I'm first going to, Sandy Bryant, did Chuck disappear? Oh. Van Zant. Oh, there he is. Sandy, would you like to come forward? It is. Come on
I'm
up.
Sandy Bryant, 601 Maple, Schertz, Texas. And due to a medical event, I was unable to attend a special birthday party for my boss today. So tonight, happy birthday.
Thank you.
And Merry Christmas to council.
Awesome. Happy birthday, Mr. Van Zandt.
He is now eligible for Social Security.
I did notice that she did fill it with Snickers, so as the later it goes, I may have some I can share with you all. Things get a little bit crazy, but thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Thank you.
You bet. Happy birthday. And I'd like to recognize Donna Schmeckel. Donna?
I'm going to read from my notes, otherwise I'll leave something out, I'm sure.
No problem.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here this evening on behalf of my brother, Dean Schmeckel. I'd like to say a huge thank you to the Schertz EMS department for their assistance about 2 weeks ago in response to a 9/11 call made by my sister-in-law at approximately 11:30 p.m. at night. My brother had been in the hospital twice before since the week of Thanksgiving with a very serious bleeding ulcer situation. He'd been feeling weak again and was getting ready to have his wife take him back to the Seguin Hospital emergency room. However, he collapsed at the house, and she didn't have any choice but to get help with a 9/11 call. As a result of the fall, he also now suffered a concussion. And so when the EMS paramedics arrived from the Marion location, they decided to take him directly to BAMC in San Antonio, which is a good thing because I think his situation had really deteriorated at that point. He's now back home and trying to regain his strength. And his wife, Lisa, daughters Kelly and Carrie, and our 86-year-old mother, Lillian, are very grateful for the quick and excellent assistance provided by the Schertz EMS. And if that's not enough, we'd also like to express our appreciation to the Schertz Animal Services Department. This past Saturday, I went to the shelter to adopt a dog named Cooper that my niece had seen online. She was looking for a pet for her 3 small children. I brought him home, and that night, the dog actually slept with my brother and his wife in their bed. My brother is 57 years old, and I can tell you this is a first for him. However, they all love him very, very much already, and he's fitting in with the whole family. Cooper now has 100 acres to run mad on, and 3 small children, ages 9, 7, and 6, who are my brother's grandchildren, and they are going to do their very best to wear him out each day. I was told at the shelter by the manager, Shanna Roman, that Cooper had been there a while. I don't know how much a while really is, but probably longer than normal. And I just want to say that the Schertz Animal Services Department does its very best to save as many animals as possible. And I know that in another shelter, Cooper might not have been so lucky to still be alive and available for adoption by my brother's family. So again, thank you very much from the Schmeckels in Marion.
Thank you. I'm going to return to the top of the list, Rosemary Hendricks.
Rosemary Hendricks, and I'm at 3017 Turquoise in Sedona. I apologize. I had a malfunction tonight with my paperwork, so I'm a little more disorganized than normal. I also want to go back onto, besides the moratorium, when also in our building, I know on our agenda tonight, we have the homestead subdivision, and what we have in our contracts as far as what was to be developed and who was to pay for the development, these are questions that a lot of us homeowners still have not found out exactly if it was approved as far as the planning, the city council for our subdivision to be built. Why is it not carried out on record? For instance, like now we have the new CPS lines. When we moved in, for instance, underground utilities, that's all in all of our plans. It shows in our PPD, everything was underground utilities. Well, we have a huge transformer in front of our subdivision now it's to supply all of the expansion. So it's not even for our subdivision, but it's literally in our backyards. You have houses that are buttoned up to it. So our question on that is, like, in the future, who's going to monitor the inspections of these big transformers? I know they have to be inspected from time to time. If the usage gets as big as it's going to get in our neighborhood, the expansion, those transformers will be putting out electric fields. Those people's homes, their backyard butts up to it. That's my questions. What we've seen as far as, we believe in Schertz. That's the reason we moved to Schertz. What we're asking is what was in our plans for our subdivision that was approved by the city. They ask all these questions. They ask about our drainage. They ask what structures were going to be built. All of that was approved by the city. It went through the steps. Planning and zoning came to city council. Okay, what broke down? Where is what's happening to the residents of Sedona? Where is the breakdown? What happened? What went wrong? That's what we would like to find out. Because even in our contracts, for instance, y'all's ordinance that's coming up with Homestead, It's showing where the developer is paying for the sewer and all of these parkland development. We have a park that was designed as topsoil drainage. We have houses that are losing their yard because of the backflow, because the park, nothing's been done on it. So the water can't flow off into the park, so it's coming back into our neighborhood. So we have brought these issues, and they wouldn't have happened because, of course, when they bought all the plans, all of that was the drainage was going to be sufficient for our development. All of these things were approved. Who follows up on things to be sure they're carried out to the way the plans were intended and approved by y'all? That's what we're asking. And so I hate to keep beating all of these things on top of the head with y'all, but I appreciate each and every one of y'all. Maybe it's not being communicated to everybody. Maybe they don't understand what we're dealing with. And maybe we can have someone like Angelina suggested that send us notices. Let us know when these changes are happening. Last week when they presented the plans for all of these townhomes to be built in our neighborhood, it was a PPD, approving a PPD. We're being told there was 3 amendments to our original amendment. Well, we live right there. If we get one of y'all's public announcements for a public hearing, why aren't we hearing about all of the changes in our neighborhood? Then we wouldn't have to come to these meetings and ask, questions. We would know. So that's, I guess, what we're asking for. Also, if in the future we can have all of these changes, we would be notified of prior to them happening. So thank you for your time. I appreciate each and every one of y'all. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you. And Patty Cullum.
I'm just going to beat that dead horse a little bit more. Patty Cullum, 9025 Peardoe. There's another subdivision that's being built, has all the lights already. It's sitting there. Subdivision behind us being built. They actually started building this week. I thought it was still in the moratorium. I don't know why they've already started building. But my thing again is the lack of lights in our subdivision, where there's another 2 subdivisions, all the utilities are in, the streets are in, and they've got lights everywhere, and we still don't have sufficient lighting for Sedona and for the Vines. It's the 120 homes that have already built, our 168 homes. Once again, it's the infrastructure. And our contracts in 2009, once again, called for a park to be built and other items. Here it is, going to be 2017, and we don't have the things that were in our contracts. That was developed, or was not developed yet, but there were drawings and plans for this to be done. And like I said, 2017, these things have not been done. And we have a lot of upset people. So instead of having everybody show up here, they talked to Rosemary and myself. Go look at our Facebook page. That's not the only problem we have. We have leaks in almost every house where the ceilings are coming down. That's another problem. That's the people who built the home. But when it rains, we have several houses where the fence has been washed away where this park should have been. I feel bad for these people. I don't have that house, but I still feel bad for them because they didn't expect that when they moved in this subdivision. I didn't expect this power substation to go up, behind my house either. Am I going to move over that? No. Am I upset? Very much. I'm upset that our landscaping isn't being taken care of, but that's the developer thing. That's our HOA that we pay almost $500 and something a year for, which that's a whole another sore subject. I once again just ask, where are all these things that were in our development that we don't have? And what help can we give our neighbors who are losing their yards due to the lack of drainage? And then again, The sewer backup wasn't just a one-time thing, Mr. James. This happens a lot, and we've been there since 2009. So, and we've been told that the substation is full, so please don't let these 200 more homes be built when we can't even support the homes we have out there now. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I don't have anyone else signed up this evening under the hearing of residents, so I'm going to move to the workshop. It's next on the agenda, and this is a discussion and update regarding the bonds overview, the 2015 general obligation bonds, the 2016 certificates of obligation, and proposed 2017 certificates of obligation. Mr. Walters.
Good evening. Tonight, I wanted to brief council on sort of the debt philosophy with the staff and the previous bond committee had worked on, as well as our current bond and debt structure, as well as some upcoming items that council would be seeing for future consideration for issuance. As we went over in the last orientation session, Schertz does look at a 30-year bond capacity. It shows how much debt the city can issue over the next 30 years without changing the tax rate. So at our current tax rate, what can we issue? In that model, the rate itself and some other factors can be adjusted so we can explore some alternate scenarios. And the goal, again, is to minimize the fluctuations in the INS rate. If we don't do this, then the INS rate could fall, and then when we do some necessary issuance, either a bond election or issue some bonds to repair some streets, that raise could jump up. So while it feels good when the rate goes down, if we know we're just going to have to raise it by that plus some later, that initial can be a shock. So the goal is to figure out how much we can issue and how to structure the debt so it's nice and even, and only change when we have to and there's a big swing or change in the assumptions. This is the chart sort of showing the results of the model. Here we have in blue, the light blue, the current debt payments, and then as we issue more bonds, the debt payments increase. See a little pause here while we do another bond election, and then goes back up with the new issuances. So the goal would be to keep this as even as possible, and either fund from fund balance when it goes up a little bit to buy the rate back down, or put money a little bit more aside when we have enough surplus that we can have that adjustment later. What I want to brief council on tonight is the upcoming 2017 issuances. Capacity in the model allows for about $9.2 million of additional debt to be issued. The estimated debt service is about $618,000. We have a fund balance for debt of $1.3 million, and we plan to put about $190,000 out of that reserve for year one to buy down that rate increase as we need to. Some of these projects that would be considered for that issuance would be the road PCI or pavement condition index implementation. The road study that we were working on would call for about $2.2 million to be issued in the first year to tackle some of the worst streets. Schertz Parkway repair, we do have some money set aside or identified for that, but we need a little bit more to finish the repairs on the worst part of Schertz Parkway. The WellMed has moved out of our senior center and into their new building on Schertz Parkway and Live Oak Road to get their space suitable for our seniors and to provide some building code updates, sprinklers, electrical work. We're estimating that could actually run up to $250,000. General City Hall remodel and maintenance could be up to another $250,000. That's the buildings in this, all the buildings in this complex. Fire Station 2 repairs, we do have about $600,000 set aside for Fire Station 2 repairs. If you're not aware, the walls actually leak pretty bad, so the repair would be taking off the outer section of the walls, resealing it, and putting the outer walls back on. It's been a while since we had that estimate, so we're estimating that the price has gone up, which is why we're putting a little bit into the bond. Park trails and maintenance, there's an item on this, item 12, a little bit later. We plan to do some additional park trails out of this debt issuance as well. We plan to issue the second half of the voter-approved bonds for Fire Station 3. So we already issued $4 million previously. This last September, so this is the second half of that. There's a fire apparatus for Station 3, which is item 16 on our agenda tonight. And there's a small contingency, about 5.5% built in for either other projects, or if the price comes back higher than original estimates have, then that would cover that without us having to either dig into fund balance or to come up with additional debt to issue to complete these projects. What that boils down to is about a $4 million general obligation bond and a $5.2 million certificate of obligation bond. We call those GOs and COs. Now, they're a little bit different. The GOs are given to the municipalities under the authority of Section 1201 and 1371 of the Government Code for the state of Texas. These bonds either have to be voter approved, or they can be used to refinance existing bonds which wouldn't need a voter approval to do. So that's what earns that designation as a general obligation. Certificates of obligation are authorized under the Certificate of Obligation Act of 1971 as included in the Government Code. These can be authorized by the governing body of a local government without voter approval, but there are additional steps that need to be taken for proper notification, and a public hearing must be held before they can be issued. The exact language from the Act says that you have to be used to construct basically any public work, purchase the material, supplies, equipment needed to do that, as well as the professional services, engineers, architects, again, towards that public work. Public work is taken to mean just about any item of the city that's open for the public, or a public building, public infrastructure, anything the city kind of needs to provide services to the citizens. We also have a third item that you'll see on our debt model, and at the last orientation, a copy of our complete debt model, including all future debt payments for each different issuance, is provided to council. You'll notice that we had the GOs and COs. We also had some tax notes on there. Tax notes are governed under Section 1431 of the Government Code. They're also called anticipation notes. They can be authorized by a governing body without voter approval. Unlike the COs, they don't have to have a notice of intention, which allows for a 40-day lead time. But they're usually limited to a 7-year maximum maturity and are meant to be used for capital equipment purchases and smaller projects. We've used them in the past for fire engine funding when we had to replace all of our radios to become P25 compliant for the federal government and the changes they made. Those were done through issuance of a tax note. So over a breakdown of our complete sort of outstanding bonds, we have about 69% of original GO bonds. 28% of our outstanding debt is original CO bonds, and about 3% are tax notes. The only caveat here is the original issuances. Even when a CO is refunded, it's refunded as a GO. So if you see a GO refunding on our debt model, that could be either an original GO as voter approved, or it could have been a CO. So I went back and looked at all of our current outstanding refundings and then allocated them to GO or CO to make sure that these ratios were accurate. So is that sort of what we want to do as council, because as a city? The GOs can be, anything can be a GO, and just about anything can be a CO, so it's up to the council and staff to reach an agreement over what the proper mix and when to go about using each of these mechanisms. The bond philosophy that came out of the last bond committee was that GOs would be for sort of new projects or new infrastructure. We wanted to build a new recreation center, a new civic center that would go before the voters, maybe an outdoor event center that would go before the voters. COs would be used to maintain our current infrastructure, repair streets. If our civic center got so dilapidated that we needed to do a major overhaul, we could use CO bonds for that. Some of the ideas behind that were those projects were already voter approved, so doing COs to maintain and upkeep or repair and replace would be in line with the voter approval. Now this is sort of broad overall, but it does allow us some flexibility between GO and CO bond use. That way important projects, if they don't fit into one category, we can still kind of act on them, such as the park trails. That would, you'll hear later, but that's an ability for us to leverage about $800,000 of federal money. So that allows, by being able to act quickly on those with a CO or a tax note, would be beneficial in that sense. And that ratio is sort of different for each community. Just depends on the perspective of the council and staff and the citizens. So San Marcos, for instance, is a 98% CO debt. Their last bond election was in 2005. New Braunfels, on the other hand, is now at about a 70% CO debt. They went through a large section where they did nothing but COs, and they have recently done some GO packages. Georgetown CO debt is about less than 50% of their total authorized debt, so the majority of their authorized debt is actually GO. If you look at them, they took a very large bond packages to council, upwards of $150 to $200 million that they plan to issue over the next many years, which is another way we can go. There's pros and cons to each method, so no one is right or wrong. But staff has recommended and supports the city's current bond philosophy. But again, that's an agreement reached between council ultimately. So, and the reason we came here to talk about this now, we're not asking actually for any of this debt to be issued tonight. That'll come back before council where we clarify and clean up the numbers and make sure we know how much we're going to issue at a later date, and then ask council to the notice of intent for the CO bonds. This discussion is important for tonight because there's two items, number 12 and 15, or sorry, 12 and 16, for the park trails and the fire apparatus. Those were planned to be issued as part of the upcoming bond issuance. As you hear later, there are some other reasons why we have to go before council now to authorize that funding, which is why I wanted to start this conversation now. Some of these debt can be issued to reimburse the city for applicable expenditures, so the city can front some money and we issue a bond later if there's a timing issue, and then reimburse the city, which is what we're planning, staff would recommend to do for those two items. To be clear, staff identified those items as part of the upcoming bond election, and that is our recommendation. So we urge council tonight, even though those two items are stating to be used from fund balance in order to start the process, staff is not recommending council approve those items unless they're willing to approve the debt to refund the general fund at a later date. So with that, is there any questions over the sort of current obligations or upcoming obligations?
All right, council, questions for Mr. Walters. Mr. Larson.
I guess a question on kind of maybe looking more forward. You said our bond capacity for this year is 9.2 million. If we utilize the maximum bond capacity for this year, how does that impact our bond capacity for next year, or is that factored in already?
It is factored in. We do have a rough estimate of how much we can issue each year. So if 9.2 this year, it's about 8 million the following year, and so on and so forth.
And then in terms of, I know this has been a long-standing policy, and most cities do this, but in terms of issuing CO debt for anticipatable infrastructure improvements and repair and maintenance, what kind of risk does that have long-term? Does eventually our bond capacity get full? Tell me a little bit about that philosophy and why that works for the city long-term, or?
So our bond capacity model takes into account some additional developments. So as new properties come in, new properties are developed, that increases our tax base. And by keeping the same tax rate, that will increase the amount of INS revenue that comes in, which allows us to basically increase the amount we pay every year in debt service. So we issue more debt, we have higher debt payments, but we have new development that comes in and provides the revenue to pay that. There's also a general increase as inflation on existing homes that could also contribute towards a higher revenue stream, which would account for being able to sell additional bonds. So I believe that's what you were asking as far as our ability, capacity grows as our city grows, and we're able to issue additional debt each year. There's a couple of other nuances I could talk about as far as how that fits in, but that's the general idea.
And so, and I apologize if I can be indulged here. I guess what I'm trying to understand is what's the risk factor for the city to use its maximum bond capacity each year, coupled with utilizing debt for anticipated repairs if there were to be maybe an unexpected downturn in growth in Schertz or an unexpected appraisal district change or philosophy change with appraisals where maybe they're not increasing as much. Is that debt capacity anticipating those risks, or is it on the assumption that things will continue as they are now?
It does anticipate that things will continue as they are now. What's very useful as far as being able to model and plan that out. So if there is a change in this year, we probably won't see it for another year, and we update this model every year. So if there's a change that happens, we're able to adjust quickly and change the amount we plan to issue, rearrange our capital improvements plan, reorder the projects that we have queued up, and being able to react with that. Property taxes are really, as far as the city's revenue source, are the most downturn resistant. They usually don't kick in for a year or two, if at all. The last downturn, Schertz was not very affected as far as the property tax piece goes. We had very few foreclosures, so we are insulated there. But by doing this every year and planning for it, we do have time to adjust the model and make sure that what we can push back, we will if there is a downturn. And there's also another policy for we have a 25% floor fund balance for in the general fund, which would be helpful in case of a downturn. That's more towards operations, but it's also available to help cushion some of these changes as well.
And then I guess my final question, I think, is in terms of that 5.5% contingency, I saw that my math may be wrong, but I think we're $50,000 over the 9.2 capacity there. And that 5.5% contingency, is that a standard contingency, or is that a contingency that says, okay, this is what we need and this is the buffer we have? So like if we're going to do a future bond capacity analysis, are we going to start with a 5.5% contingency, or is that just dependent upon what we need in the funds? Does that question make sense to you?
Yeah, so if we have basically a 5%, I believe if it does add up to about 50,000 over, which it does, that should be 350,000, and it would be more of a 5% contingency. But that would probably be an amount that we would put in all for future.
That's the standard. It's not usually higher or lower, but it's usually around there.
No, I will say this a couple things maybe, because what we've done here is we've sort of, with the bond issuance here, we've built in a bit of contingency. Some of the numbers we're working off are fairly rough. So for instance, the park trails and maintenance, we can kind of go in and apply for what we can do, get some estimates. We have some ability to do that. But for instance, if the senior center remodel comes in at $275,000, we just want to make sure we have bond capacity. I will say that one thing we're working on for our capital projects is to do a better job estimating those costs early on, so that we factor in when are we likely to start construction. We don't assume we'll do everything the first year, because we can't. Typically we'll do some the first year, some the second, some the third. And so on those, we need to build in some inflation contingency. The other thing I think Dudley would probably nod with is we probably need to do a better job of just spending some money to get a more definitive cost on the front end of those, as opposed to we kind of more rough estimate it, and then I think sometimes we're a bit surprised then by things. So again, with contingency, I think that's an area we generally need to improve on the engineering projects. But those would then build in to the particular items as opposed to show up as much of a general contingency here. But I think because of the rough nature of this, we wanted to factor that in because, as James said, you know, the fire station repairs may be higher because of the time. Or again, with building repairs, often when you go in, you open it up, you find something that you weren't anticipating finding, and that typically sends the cost up.
Thank you both. Great answer. Thank you.
Mr. Kessel.
Just two things to add to that. First, on the contingency, I think Mr. James touched on that a little bit, but think of different projects in different ways as to what is normal contingency. If you're building a new utility line through a cornfield and you pretty much don't have any obstacles, you'll have a much lower contingency. That same utility line going through a very populated downtown area with a lot of other conflicting areas, you're liable to need a much higher contingency. On construction projects, it's common to see 10% contingency. If it's a low risk, you might see 5%. If it's a high risk, you might see 15% or 18%. And so the 5% is on the lower end of what you might see for something that you would think you might do a year or two from now. As far as the risk as well, I think there's another element of risk, which is rising or falling interest rates. And so there's a risk of acting too soon or too late. So if we wait a year to issue that same debt and do 17 million or whatever the math would be, next year we may have actually higher rates and we'd pay more for that money. That's a bit of risk. So it's sometimes good to lock in a lower rate now and instead of combining that. So, but that of course changes with every issuance. You have to do that analysis. So there's a bit of risk that you would want to consider in that regard as well.
Mr. Gutierrez.
You indicated small projects. Is there a dollar ceiling that would be considered a small project before it becomes an intermediate or larger project?
That's it's a subject to change, as the statute doesn't say an amount in particular, so it's a judgment call. If it's a large project, you really try to match sort of the useful life of the infrastructure or capital item that you're purchasing to the life of the debt instrument. So if it's going to be a 20-year improvement that you're doing, it's probably best to go with a 20-year debt instrument to kind of match that. Whereas a fire engine lasts maybe 10 years on the front line, so you don't want to go past 10 years as far as the debt, because then you're basically paying in debt. You have to go out for another bond issuance, and you're paying on 2 bond issuances for only 1 active piece of equipment or infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Davis?
James, you said that the current modeling that you're doing is based on our current tax rate?
Yes, yes, sir.
Walters.
Mr. Crawford?
Mr. Walters, 2 quick questions. I didn't see this in the Dropbox. I could have missed it. Is this something you could, this presentation, could you send it to us in your Dropbox?
Yes. Yes,
You wouldn't mind? And the second question, you don't have any clue what the debt service is going to be on this right now, so you're making a guess about what it would cost, right?
Yes, based on our last round of issuances.
Okay. That's fine. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? All right, if there are no other questions, then we'll move on from the workshop to the consent agenda. Thank you, Mr. Walters. On the consent agenda this evening, we have item number 1, the minutes, consideration or action regarding the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of December 13, 2016. We have item number 2, excused council absences, excusing the absence of Mayor Pro Tem Edwards from the November 21, 2016 meeting, and excuse the absence of Councilmember Larson from the December 13, 2016 meeting. Item number 3 is Ordinance 16T40, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a budget adjustment to fund the demolition and replacement of the bridge at Lower Seguin Road in Cibolo Creek, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance and providing an effective date. Item number 4, Ordinance 16S39, an ordinance by the City Council of City of Schertz, Texas, to approve a specific use permit to allow for operation of a convenience store with gas pumps at 17601 Four Oaks Lane in Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas. Item number 5, Resolution 16R95, a resolution by the City Council of City of Schertz, Texas, approving a request for a historical incentive program for the Main Street area grant for 603 Main Street in the City of Schertz, Texas, and related matters in connection therewith. Ladies and gentlemen, any of these that need to be pulled for individual consideration?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to request that item number 5, 16R95, be pulled for individual consideration.
All right, item number 5. Any others? Hearing none, then is there a motion to approve the items on consent 1 through 4?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion we approve.
I've got a motion from Mr. Davis.
Second.
Second from Dr. Kaiser. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Have 7 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. We'll move now to item number 5, which is resolution by the 16R95, resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, approving a request for a historical incentive program for the Main Street area grant for 603 Main Street in the City of Schertz, Texas, and related matters in connection therewith. Mr. Davis, you have questions on that one? I'll leave it. I'll open it for you, sir.
Yes, sir. In looking at the sector plan that was developed for historic downtown Schertz, and the goals that we have for down there, I'm not so sure that I'm up to speed on many of the plans that we have for that area. The staff has done a great job with our council orientation, but we have not talked about things like the comprehensive land plan yet. We have not talked about downtown Schertz and our vision for down there. We have not talked about various funding streams, like to include the use of the hotel occupancy funding. And in reading the package that we've got here tonight, I've got some concerns about, without having that background, using hotel funds to essentially fund a private residence improvement. I understand that our overall goal is to look at downtown Schertz, maintain the character and improve what we've got down there. I'm certainly an advocate for taking city funds to help advocate our businesses down there and improve their appearance and see how they improve the quality of life for the city overall. I'm just not quite sure I can see all the connections between improvements to a private residence, even though it's on the historical side, especially considering when we look at what we've got approved so far as landmark properties. From what I saw on the city website tonight, we've got about 7 that I could count that are designated on Main Street. We have another 7 or 8 or so properties in the general area down there that would not qualify under that program for improvements. And then in reading the agreement, I'm just not, I don't get that good feeling when we're talking about taking potentially $20,000 to make improvements to a private residence. What's to stop that resident owner to turn around and make that improvement, get $20,000 from the city? I understand we're getting a better appearing dwelling on Main Street, but if they were to turn around and sell that property, basically you could be looking at it's a flip. And it's a flip where a significant portion, half or so, is coming from our hotel funds. And looking at the agreement, I'm not seeing any qualifications on that other than it has to be a designated property. There are certain features that we would match. But to me, there's a lot of gaps in this request that I just don't see all the connections yet.
Sure. So let me maybe back up. And again, I will say this. I think certainly part of this is it's an existing program, and we haven't included in council orientation what we've got with regard to the sector plan and Main Street and the idea there, nor have we really touched on sort of the efforts we're undertaking to implement that plan, which, as I've talked to council about before, there's not necessarily a magic bullet to revitalize Main Street and have it be what the plan lays out. And so with that, what we've tried to do is tackle a series of things that we view as problems. So again, there's a fee waiver in the Main Street area as well. There's a zoning district that folks can apply for that allows both residential and commercial uses within the district. And then one thing is the grant program as well. So to be clear, the hotel occupancy tax, as it kind of references, can be used to boost tourism. So one of the issues that we have with regard to who is eligible for this is I really have to be able to justify it and say that I think we'll get that historic tourism element. And frankly, we weren't confident that if we have a building apart from this area that we could really justify and say you're going to get folks going to that area particular to this. It really, we felt like we could justify this is sort of the Main Street, this is Schertz's old downtown, if you will. And so one of the things that, again, a few years ago we faced at the time was the Historic Committee was looking to find ways to preserve the historic character of the area and the historic structures. And one of the things that they proposed at the time was a historic ordinance, if you will, like some communities have, that restrict the ability of folks to make alterations to structures. It's a bit of the stick approach, if you will. We're gonna prevent you from doing that. I think, you know, as I said at the time, I just didn't think we were ready for that as a community. I don't think folks were there yet to say, you know, I can, as you heard tonight with the moratorium, folks kind of have enough issues with the regulations we do have, let alone we're going to tell a property owner who's lived there for 50 years, yeah, you can't change out the windows or the roof pitch. So what we did instead is we went with more of the carrot approach, which was to encourage folks to make those improvements. Again, part of the reason is you can impose those ordinances, but it doesn't force folks to keep buildings up or keep properties up. And often what you hear as a concern is we're starting to lose structures as they age, as they fall apart, and that frankly, because of the age of those structures, because of the cost of trying to maintain the historic integrity, there are increased costs associated with that. The flip side is all of those who own a home, all of those of us who own a home, we have repair and maintenance costs that we are forced to bear, and so why are we doing it for one area or the other? And really, again, the justification here was to try to revitalize that area. And very often, as you'll see, as you attempt to revitalize areas, you drive some sort of activity there, be it tourism, for example, it requires an infusion of money or capital to try to make that happen. Now, not in every case. And again, this isn't the panacea for it. We can't just do this and expect we're going to go out there in 6 months or a year and it's totally transformed. It'll be a slow process of chipping away. But to that end, I think what I would say with regard to being a commercial property or a residential property, it's about maintaining that historic structure. It's really not a function of whether there's a business there or a residence there, and that one of the things that frankly we've heard in this area that hasn't happened but we'd open to is, again, a rezone to that district that would allow the building to effectively convert back and forth between a business and a residence. One of the challenges that folks have is they're concerned about changing that use and then not being able to convert back because of some of those zoning issues. And again, because of the floodplain issues in this area, we feel like it's important to offer as much flexibility as possible. The same thing is really the case if our goal is to have folks put money in those structures to revitalize them and thus revitalize the area. It's really not an issue if somebody says, hey, here's a way to come in, take advantage of it, make those improvements to the structure, and then, yeah, effectively they turn around and flip it, and someone owns it, maintains it, uses a business out of it, whatever the case may be. Again, our goal is to get people to make investments in those properties. And again, frankly, as you will, you know, what you see in many other communities, San Antonio, for instance, is you often rely on those people who say, yeah, I come in, I find out what grants or what assistance is available, I purchase those properties, I make the improvements, turn around and sell it, I take that and then I move on to the next one. Because again, often they're better positioned to do that than someone is who's just an average property owner who says, man, that's a big project to take on. I've heard horror stories of buying an old historic structure and what I may find, what I may not find. And so from that regard, just a different way to look about it. If our goal is to get this revitalized, frankly, I think as we've seen the program, and that doesn't mean we don't want to revisit and make changes, yeah, if we got somebody who came in this area and said, wow, y'all have this program, you're doing this thing, that thing, I can start coming in and applying and fixing those structures up. And at the end of the day, if they're able to fix up 5 or 6 and flip them, then what we benefit from is now we've had those improvements to the area. And so with that regard, I think my reaction is that occurring isn't inconsistent with the goal of the program and what we're trying to achieve. So maybe as a final point, I think what folks have long been frustrated with are the lack of revitalization that they've seen with regard to Main Street. One of the big challenges we have there, and again, haven't hit, and some of you may know this, is that much of this area is within the floodplain. So that imposes additional restrictions and limitations on folks, and frankly, additional obstacles to folks in terms of being able to go in and buy structures and make improvements, and that's been a challenge why some have not developed. One of the other things that we have an issue with is regards to, frankly, it's a bit of a hodgepodge area with regard to land use. You know, we often hear from folks, man, it doesn't have that activity, it doesn't have that vitality, it doesn't have those things. But next time you go down, we have a lot of businesses there that are very much going concerns, that do a lot of business. We hear more complaints about parking issues on the street than a lack thereof. But what I will say is those businesses aren't what a lot of folks maybe want to see. It's not a coffee shop, it's not an antique shop, it's not a boutique clothing store, though we've had some of those things. It's an auto repair business. It's a Mexican food restaurant. But frankly, we have a lot of folks who go down there to get a tire changed, to get something to eat. But again, I think that's one of the challenges that we have, and that's a dilemma as we implement our plan, is to what degree we as a city try to force the market one way or work within that and let the market kind of work and take its time and maintain structures. And so, again, what I will say is this is one of a number of tools. None of those tools are the be-all, end-all. But I think the goal of this stems from a concern that people have that we're not driving tourism to one of our most historic areas, and that's a function of a lack of reinvestment in those properties and allowing them to decay, and that this is a tool to get there. But certainly I think the concerns you've expressed are valid per se, and again, may just be a contradictory philosophy.
Have we, how many properties have we implemented this program on where we've made matching grants to improvements?
This will be the second. The first, I think, is 805 Main Street, and they've just worked that up, and I believe have applied for their reimbursement, but that grant's been approved, and so we've seen it go forward. So this is a fairly new program, and frankly, we didn't hear anything from anybody for the first year or so. We went a year and a half, 2 years maybe, without anybody coming forward, and then now we've had a couple come forward to apply for it. So it is a new program in the grand scheme of things as a whole, and is new in terms of having folks come in and apply for it.
And what is 805?
805 is a business. It's a real estate office and a retail store kind of combination. A couple blocks down on the same side.
So this would be the first property that we're under consideration that's planned to be a private residence.
Yes. This is only the second that's coming, yes, sir.
And this is coming from the hotel occupancy fund.
Yes, sir.
Fund.
Yes, sir.
How much money do we typically have available in the hotel fund, and what is it typically used for beyond items like this?
I will let Mr. Walters speak to that.
I'm sure he would have gotten to all of this in our orientations down the road, but unfortunately this came up on the agenda.
So the hotel occupancy tax in Schertz is collected from each our 4 hotels, and we're averaging about $372,000 annually coming in. A few years back, we did do a review on what's sort of legal to spend that money on, and we changed the structure of that fund and its expenses. Previously, the majority of the funds actually were used up in supporting of the Civic Center and Community Center operations, and then when we changed that up, it freed up a lot of funding from that revenue stream that hasn't really been allocated to any one particular project yet. The fund does support some of the local city festivals that we have. providing for entertainment services, security services under the law, as well as some improvements to sports facilities that hold like youth tournaments and bring in out-of-state, or not out-of-state, but teams from far away that would benefit the hotels. Generally, the use of those funds are to provide for a reason or an event to bring in tourists, which is anybody that's outside city limits, then coming in and putting heads in beds is sort of the term. So we're taking money from the hotels to reinvest them to bring more people into the hotels, is a simple way to look at it. There's much more fine print as far as the section of the local government code that authorizes it, and we can get that a TML summary that's a good guideline to council if they wish. Off the cuff, we have now over $1 million in the fund balance, and we put back about $180,000 every year in additional taxes we collect versus what we spent since we've changed structurally with that fund.
Thank you.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Walter?
Are grant reimbursements done after completion of the project?
So the way we do it is we allow draws on the grant. So we allow a property owner to come in and do the roof, and come back in and say, okay, I spent $15,000 on the roof. Can I get $7,500? Pay that out, because we got the roof done, and then the idea is they have those funds to help cover the cost of the next repair, say the plumbing, and move forward. So we allow a few draws with it. Again, we could have a circumstance where somebody goes in, they do the roof, and they go, oh, this isn't working out for me, I'm going to stop. I think the way we view it is we got the improvement, we've been able to go out and inspect it, see it's there, and so to some degree, while we didn't get the whole thing, if they had likely walked in and said, I just want to take care of the roof, we'd come back in and we would have come in and said, yeah, we'll give you a grant for just the roof because it helps. And so there is a bit of risk there that we don't get the full completion, but we feel like we've mitigated it by ensuring we got at least the improvement that we're going for. Now the structure hopefully is watertight from above.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Larson?
Is there a mechanism in place to make sure that the improvements maintain the historical integrity of the?
There is. So this goes before the Historic Preservation Committee. So these applications, so they go through, the proposal goes through them. They make sure they're comfortable with the improvements and then make a recommendation. So this has gone before you. And again, the property owner is just looking to make some minor changes to the exterior, put up a railing if code requires it, but trying to find something that would have been consistent with the era, and then a few features up along the roof line as well.
Okay, Mr. Edwards?
Just to let you guys know, and Mr. Davis, I understand your concern, but I will certainly tell you this particular property that you're looking at here, 603, I actually put in an offer on this property, and I had a SA Remodeling come out to take a look at it. $20,000, that's a drop in the bucket for what that would have cost for the price of the home, and actually to go in and redo that home to bring it up to livable standards was outrageous. So we had to back away from it for that reason. It's just a numbers game. So 20,000 is a drop in the bucket on that one.
Mr. Crawford? Dr. Kaiser?
I had a lot of the same concerns that Mr. Davis had as far as just allowing a private homeowner to say, I'd like a grant of city money to bring my home, and make it better.
Right.
I'm sure a lot of us would like that.
Yes.
But, are there restrictions as to what they can use that money for? So, I understand the roof, the outside, you want to, make, and I'm all for beautifying, Main Street. But can they say, hey, we just want to have better wood floors inside our home?
Yeah.
So can they use it for that?
So perhaps is the answer. In this case, no. Well, let me back up. They have foundation work. I don't doubt that they will have to do some of the wood flooring repair. So likely with staff saying if it was tied to the foundation repair, we would approve that expenditure of it. So let me give you a different than the floor. If somebody comes in and says, man, I was watching HGTV, there are these great granite countertops and da-da-da-da-da. We are trying to avoid paying for things like that. Again, many grant programs, again, will. If the kitchen is falling apart and you walked in and there's effectively no kitchen, you would say, well, somebody's got to have a kitchen. But you're right, those things put us in a bit of a bind as to making a sort of a judgment call as to, well, is it sort of what's necessary? Are you going above, and am I paying for your countertops? And so fortunately, with the last one and with this one, the elements that you see have laid out are not what I would call, I don't know, the decor, they're really basic core components to make the structure livable, as opposed to paying for fixtures and things like that. But again, in other communities I've worked in, you'll go into structures and they've literally been gutted. There is no kitchen. Where the kitchen should be, everything's gone. Where the bathroom, everything's gone. And the property owner looks and goes, I got to put in a bathtub. Again, I think the concern is I'm paying for an over-the-top, gold-plated Taj Mahal. And so what we've really done is taken a more conservative approach. And what we found on the last one and this one are those core elements of roof, plumbing, wiring, foundation, things like that are eating up all of the maximum grant allowance. And so we're frankly able to avoid those circumstances.
And I did see the expense list, so yeah.
Yeah. And so at some point we'll get hit with that.
Right.
And we'll have to deal with it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Crawford?
Mr. James, I have the same concerns that Mr. Davis has and Dr. Kaiser. I'd also like to add, and you well know, having seen me on P&Z for 6 years, that I support the ordinance change or the zoning change we made for downtown on Main Street to help people give them a two-way commercial residential. I've talked to you numerous times about how we need to do something, but we don't have a Harry Potter magic wand to make the floodplain go away. And you know very well, as I do, that the federal government will not let you borrow money to buy property in a floodplain. All those things being said, you've done an eloquent job of saying what a great project this is and how it'll add value to the property and it'll help the city, and I agree with all those things. If it's that good of a project, go to the bank and borrow the money. There's no mechanism for the city to have a guarantee they get their money back other than what you described about the betterment of the city, which I certainly want to, I wish I could go, I've thought about going down on Main Street and buy something, try to do a bakery or sandwich shop, you know that. But that onerous part of debt makes it a little bit difficult when you're in a floodplain. I've seen council about 4 years ago have someone who was in business here that had a grant, have the member business fail for I don't know why, come back to council, say, I'd like you to have my $10,000 grant forgiven. And council did that. I'd rather see the $20,000 go toward fixing Schertz Parkway or Guadacoma as far as streets, and have the person that owns the property, as many of us do, go to the bank, work out a deal, and make it happen that way to alleviate the concerns we have about working on private residences. And at the same time, I'd like to see this downtown Main Street area be a viable, where's our city ordinance for doing food trucks and closing off the street and make people come down and do things.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of in an awkward position. I agree with the other two members, and I know people would like to see this done, but I'm also concerned about using city money to do things that are really for an individual resident to take care of. So I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I have a concern.
No, certainly, and not taken that way. Again, I think, and let me go back to this, as cities try to achieve different things, be it revitalization, historic preservation, economic development, general provision of infrastructure, and I'm sorry.
On the subject of economic development, is the hotel tax money part of EDC's money or part of the Schertz general budget money?
No, it is not part of EDC's budget.
There are two separate funds there.
Yes, sir. And so with whatever you're trying to do, different communities have different programs or different tools that they're comfortable with. It fits with the wishes and desires of their citizens, that deal with the particulars of what their situation is, and so some are more effective than others going forward. Now, again, let me say this. I would not go as far to say the impression I get is that all of council is comfortable with this sort of an investment into a commercial business. If somebody walked in and said, I want to open up a retail store out of it, that everybody would say, oh, well, then problem solved, you're fine, kind of go ahead. What I am hearing is a particular note with regard to the fact that it is for a residence, and certainly we can all relate to owning a home and having costs associated with those repairs, and certainly as I go through that now myself with my house, I'm fully aware of those costs of those.
I'd open that sandwich shop.
That's right. And so again, in this case, the reason we're doing it, and again, over time, one's feeling on things changes. We get new council members. Everything changes over time. You can't stay static. But as you said, the goal has generally been to try to bring revitalization to Main Street because, frankly, the market hasn't done that on its own in a way that we would want. We didn't just, we heard from folks and we've all kind of looked out there and said it's not what we'd want it to be. So is every tool that we're using now still appropriate today? Maybe that's something we need to revisit. Are there other tools out there that we probably need to look to implement? I would say certainly that's the case. But I will say that what I have found in my experience is that you often have to deal in less than ideal situations. And so again, I don't know that what anybody's vision of Main Street is just a bunch of residents. I think what we've heard from folks in the past is it becomes our commercial center. It becomes that meeting place for folks as well. But the reality is there are multiple obstacles that have kept, I think, the market from doing that. The floodplain's one. The traffic pattern is another associated with the way folks have to use a portion of that to cut through where they're going. They're not planning to stop. They're trying to get from one spot to the other, and that doesn't help necessarily. We're not pulling that traffic in. And then the reality that we have is many of the structures we have there were built as single-family residences. Our Main Street has not made that turn to where we found that folks are coming in and buying those structures up that were single-family homes and able to make always able to make a go of it with a business of the type we want, a sandwich shop, a bakery, a coffee shop, a retail boutique, a used bookstore, the things we may envision. Frankly, what we've seen is a lot of folks be able to make a go of it with an auto repair business, a restaurant, and if you look at where those are, those weren't...
I'm going to stop you.
Okay, sorry, Mayor.
No. So a couple of thoughts. The first one is that what we have before us is a question of a resolution authorizing the approval of a request under an existing program in the city of Schertz. We have a current policy of the city council that has not yet been changed. We have a homeowner who has acted in good faith and come before the city and asked to have a request approved based upon an existing program. We have moved to some degree into discussing the merits of that program, and that is incidental to what we're posted for here. What we will do then is we will have a future item on a future agenda, probably at our next meeting, where we will talk about this policy and address that at that time. But this evening, we are asked in this particular item to give approval to or a denial to a homeowner who has come before us under an existing council program and acted in good faith. So at this point, unless council objects to the chair, I would ask that we have a motion to approve or disapprove and move forward.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 16R95 because it does meet the current program specifications.
Second.
I have a motion for Mr. Edwards, a second for Mr. Larson. Other comments, questions pertinent to the approval at this time? Hearing none, I will call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Aye.
Nay. Aye.
Have 5 ayes and 2 nays, the motion carries. Move on at this time. So I'll bring up the agenda item that we need to have later on in the meeting. We've already disposed of item number 6. I'm going to move on now to item number 7, ordinance 16T44, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a budget adjustment to fund the city's portion of sewer improvements in conjunction with the development of the Homestead subdivision, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, declaring an emergency, and providing an effective date. Mr. James, anything on this one? Or would you like council just to jump into questions or? No, it's quite all right. We've moved around on the agenda a little bit. No problem.
It's not going to be one of those nights. What we've got before you is approval of a resolution to allow a couple of agreements with the developer of the Homestead project. We do these periodically with City Council. We come forward, the EDC makes provision to enter into agreements to affect the timing of things and to allow city participation. I'll cover the park agreement first. And it touches on something maybe earlier tonight. Ideally, when we have a large enough development or a master plan development, we try to locate a park within that project to serve not only the folks who are going to live in that development, but who live outside of that development in a public city park. Because if we don't get it on the front end, we are likely not to get a park and not be able to meet the goals of our Parks Master Plan with regard to distance for park service. As you heard earlier tonight, though, one of the challenges is just having a piece of land doesn't get us a park. It again then leaves it for us in the Parks Department to try to figure out how they pay for those improvements. And so what we've been doing for really the last 5 years or so is trying to link those two things together, use the two elements for our parkland dedication, the land and the improvement, and reach agreement with the developer on both the park and the improvement. And so again, we kind of get the best of both worlds. What we find then is that the developer is able to fund those improvements, do it in conjunction with the development of their property, and the city isn't having to fund it from another source or ensure we reserve those funds for that. And so the park agreement, though, what you often find is that...
I think you're on number 8, and you're on number 7.
Which one am I on? I'm totally lost.
Item 7. So 16T44. This is the authorizing a budget adjustment to fund our portion of the sewer improvements.
I'm sorry. So yeah,
But cool. We've got the briefing for number 8.
You've got the briefing. So this is basically on this. Thanks, James. This is one of those nights. Not the park agreement, but the subdivision agreement. The developer is effectively oversizing sewer improvements. And in exchange, they're saying, I'm building more than is needed to serve my development that provides general capacity of the city. We'd like the city to contribute that. The reason the city doesn't turn and say, no, we don't want to help you, just build to meet your need, is that we then will have more problems in the future as to how we fit additional lift stations in and run parallel lines. So we are looking for a budget amendment to enter into the agreement to pay for the excess capacity in the sewer facilities, a lift station, force mains.
Yeah, it is very cost effective. Council, questions for Mr. James?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 16T44.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Mr. Crawford. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
7 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. Item number 8, Resolution 16R96, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing an agreement with the developer of the Homestead subdivision project for construction of public improvements and parkland improvements.
Okay, I think this is the last item I talk on tonight. This is the last you'll hear of me to mess up. So as I was saying, one of the agreements is the park agreement. Again, the park is often not in the first phase, so it lets the developer phase that as we go forward. Again, they put up a bond to cover those costs, and then they work through that with phases. So we've got a surety to ensure they build those improvements. The other item that you heard about has to do with those sewer improvements. Again, as is often the case, it includes a few other things. So again, if they're running behind on some of the street trees, landscaping, reestablishment of grass, it allows that. And again, if they are moving slower on the sewer, it allows them to file the plats. Again, they have the ability to do pump and haul because we're insured we get the sewer improvements to connect going forward. You got drafts of both those agreements that have been tweaked. The resolution does include the ability to make changes subject to the city manager and city attorney. So again, as they bounce it off with their attorney, if I've misspelled something, mistyped, misreferenced, we have the ability to tidy that up. But again, you've got the general gist of it. Again, the sewer improvements that we would fund are done in 2 phases. There's the lift station and force main, and then as they move forward with additional lots, they have to come back in and do another force main. So we'll pay as they build. So again, it ensures they build it, we then accept it, and they get their money.
Very good. Council, questions for Mr. James?
Motion, we approve resolution number 16R-96.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Thompson, a second from Dr. Kaiser. Other questions, comments from council? Mr. Larson.
I do have a question. I'm sorry, Mr. James. I know it's been a long night for everybody. And you addressed some of this, but I really wanted to ask it specifically for the individuals who did speak. You talked about the surety bonds ensuring the improvements do get completed. In as brief a way as possible, can you kind of give a 30-second overview of how that mechanism works if they fail to meet the agreed portion of the agreement?
What happens is they put up the surety. If they don't meet the requirements in the agreement, then we have the ability to call in that bond effectively and use those funds to make those improvements. Again, a key here maybe that's different than we did in the past with the park in particular is if we just took the land, city doesn't have a bunch of money to make improvements to park, and that's where folks get frustrated. So again, we have about 3 or 4 city parks out there, maybe more, depending on which count, maybe half dozen or so. Some of them never get it. That we've got residents going, when are you getting to my park? This is a way to avoid having that happen so that we can come back and click through and get the ones we've got.
And so just to clarify, this is different than we've done in past agreements. This is an extra security that we've added? Or
No, I'm sorry. No, the last few agreements that we've done over the last 4 or 5 years, we've done them this way.
Okay.
In the past, what we would often do is just take land and not have a mechanism for the improvement built in. In this case, we're folding both of them in.
Very good. I do have a motion and a second. Other comments or questions from council? If none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. Next item on the agenda is item number 9, which is Resolution 16R93, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, designating the city's official newspaper and other matters in connection therewith. Mrs. Dennis?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Management, and citizens. We have an ordinance, 78M22, that requires the City Council by resolution to designate a public newspaper of general circulation in the City of Schertz. On December the 7th, we were notified that the Daily Commercial Recorder, which is our current newspaper of record, will cease publication effective December 30th. Staff solicited information regarding pricing and publication frequency from the San Antonio Express News, the Northeast Herald, and the Seguin Gazette. Based upon information gathered and speaking to all departments who publish legal notices, it's the best interest is to name the San Antonio Express News as the City of Schertz newspaper of record effective December 22nd, 2016. We're also encouraging staff, encouraged to, whenever possible, to utilize a Wednesday publication rates and dates, if possible, which will provide the city substantial savings. Information regarding where to locate, once approval by the council, information regarding where to locate our legal postings will be published in our Schertz magazine as well on the website. Staff recommends approval of naming the San Antonio Express News as the city's newspaper of record.
Questions for Mrs. Dennis?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion we approve resolution number 16R93.
Second.
A motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from my right ear, hearing first Mr. Gutierrez. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. Next item on the agenda this evening, we have item number 10, resignations and appointments to the various city boards, commissions, and committees.
Me again. As a result of the elections, recent election, we received resignations from Dr. Kaiser from the Economic Development Board, Mark Davis from Parks and Rec and Transportation Safety Advisory Board, and Burt Crawford from the Planning and Zoning Commission. That created 3 vacancies, 4. We also had several other vacancies. Various applications, we solicited various applications of new individuals as well as existing members came in. Applications were presented to the interview committee on Thursday, December the 8th, and interviews were conducted. As a result of the meeting, the interview committee, I'm going to read what their recommendations are. And as I read these recommendations. If the individuals are in the audience, I'd ask them to stand to be recognized. Based upon the findings of the interview committee, they are recommending that Mr. Danny Sell be appointed as alternate member to the Board of Adjustment, Ms. Mirelle Herculum and Mr. Mark Tu to be appointed regular members to the Economic Development Corporation Board of Directors, Dr. Roland Washington and Mr. Philip Rowland, regular members to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and former council member Jim Fowler as an alternate member. They also recommended approval of Mr. Glenn Outlaw as a regular member to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They recommended John Carew and Mr. Paul Ryson, regular members to the Transportation Safety Advisory Commission, and we are going to move Mr. Philip Rowland from a regular member to an alternate member. Staff recommends council approve the presentation, approve the resignation and appointments as presented.
Very good. I'd first of all like to thank everybody that's here that has stepped up and volunteered to serve on one of our boards, committees, and commissions. Thank you. It's what makes our city go when our residents participate in all of those bodies that advise this council and help this city go. Thank you all very much. So I'm going to make a motion from the chair that we approve the resignations and appointments as recommended by the staff and the interview committee as read.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any other comments, questions from council?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to say that I sat in with Mr. Richmond, Mr. Councilman Davis, as well as Tim Brown from Economic Development and Ms. Brenda Dennis and Bert Crawford as well. And we sat there and we went through each one of those interviews, and I can tell you, you certainly have good people in place, and the changes that were made were pertinent and worthy. And so thank you guys so much for serving again. Glenn.
Indeed. Comments or questions further from council? Hearing none, then I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
7 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. Item number 11, City Council Liaison Position Appointments. Consideration or action regarding appointments to the various City Council Liaison positions. Do you have a list of those, Ms. Schmeckel?
Okay, back on December 6th, y'all discussed the different liaison positions amongst yourself, and the following council members have offered to serve. Animal Control Advisory Committee, Councilmember Gutierrez. Sweetheart Advisory Group, Councilmember Kaiser. And on this one, I do want to say that right now it's staff and executive management is reviewing it. There may be some refocus or clarification on that, but right now your name is on it. Number 3, the Schertz Housing Authority, Councilmember Davis. Number 4, Schertz Seguin Local Government, SSLGC, Councilmember Crawford. Number 5, Interview Committee for Appointments to City Boards and Commissions, Council Members Davis and Crawford. Number 6, Lone Star Rail District Board, Council Member Gutierrez, and a note here is that one is right now inactive, but possibly will resurrect itself. Number 7, the TERS 2 Board, Council Member Gutierrez. And number 8, the Investment Advisory Committee, Council Member Gutierrez. That's all of the offers we have.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Kessel, you have a comment?
Just sort of a structural comment to add to what was just said, and I think it's probably a function of us taking a look with the new city council and trying to understand how we have these boards and commissions and committees structured. We need to think of these different appointments as either committees or board appointments or liaison appointments. That each one is serving in a slightly different manner. For example, the Animal Control Advisory Committee is a state mandated board, and so the council person in that committee is an actual appointed committee member who would participate as required as a municipal official on that committee. There's another one that's the Schertz Housing Authority Board. The appointment there would be the actual board member position. And you can kind of go through interview committee as a committee appointment, Lone Star Rail Board as a board member, TERS Board as a board member, Investment Committee as a committee member. That leaves the Schertz Sweetheart Advisory Group as a liaison, and then the Schertz Seguin Local Government Corporation member as a liaison. And so, again, stuff that we would be getting into a little bit more probably in the next month or so with training, does define those roles very particularly, and I think that's what Ms. Meckel had referenced earlier. So I wanted to kind of share that with the full council, that's our discussion is what are the roles and responsibilities of the council positions, and is that what the council members had anticipated doing and participating in?
Thank you for clarifying that.
And I'd like to make a comment on that as well. There was a time early on when I was first elected that we had members of council selected as liaisons to nearly every board, committee, and commission that we had in the city, to the point that I actually sat on the dais with planning and zoning as a member of council, but not as a voting member or member of the planning and zoning commission. We stopped doing that for a number of reasons, and a big part of it had to do with issues of transparency, right? For example, if I were as mayor to be a liaison to planning and zoning and attend every planning and zoning commission meeting and sit on the dais, there's a fair argument that says that, well, gosh, planning and zoning just does whatever the mayor says, because every time they do something he doesn't like, he turns his head and raises his eyebrows, and all of a sudden everything changes. Undue influence is something we have to be careful about, and we certainly don't want to have transparency issues. So what Mr. Kessel is alluding to is us continuing to be careful about how we engage in roles as liaisons, members of boards, members of committees, to make sure that we maintain transparency and maintain a lack of undue influence. So I just wanted to give that little historical perspective for anybody that might go back and read minutes or look at the way we used to do things. We made a lot of changes in these over the years, and a lot of it has come from advice from counsel. And I say counsel as in legal counsel, our city attorney and his firm. So any comments or questions on this
Mayor.
before we ratify what was read by the city secretary?
Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Crawford.
In view of your comments just now and our discussion last Tuesday after council, is there a problem with any of us attending other committees that other members have been appointed to as an observer under the heading of education and trying to be involved? Not sit on a dais or just sit in the back of the room like we do in the ante room out there when we do our training, such that we could see what's going on and understand and have a possibility of being involved later.
Right. So I think that it's a great idea for council members, obviously not on a quorum.
I mean, on planning and zoning kind of boards.
Right, but to attend any that you wish to attend, and I would just refer you to page 2 of our Code of Ethics and make sure that you're adhering to that, and you should be in good shape. That's been reviewed by the council, reviewed by our city attorney, and as long as we're adhering to that, should have no issues whatsoever.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I can say, and you can see that I had volunteered for the Sweetheart Advisory Group. I think I would have appreciated, and maybe everyone else would, more in-depth descriptions as to the roles of that. You know, we were asked this 2 weeks ago. I've received no information on any of these. And I'll be honest, I did not know the role about this until just before the meeting. I think when we talk about transparency, that's not just to the residents, but to the people on the council as well. So I know I would have appreciated more in-depth information as to what the role was for each person serving on one of these.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely a fair point. And I guess the challenge that we have is that we've always, and it's not an excuse, but we've always approached all of this rather loosely as a council. In fact, it used to be when I was first on council that Mayor Baldwin would say, hey, anybody want to serve on any of these? Do you want to do that? And you went, okay, great. Just put that down in the minutes, put it on the next set of the next agenda, and we'll go from there. It was really that was the way that we did it. And we haven't, I guess, gotten to a place where we've put we have no written process for doing this. We have no discipline around it. It's just something that we've done as we've done it. And so maybe to your point, it's time to have some discipline about it and put together a process and offer some definition. We just haven't done it in the past.
So we're going to vote. So we are tied to these now? I don't feel like I want to be tied to this, not having had the information prior to this evening.
Well, let's do this in that case, because I don't think that any board or committee, commission, et cetera, is going to suffer for our lack of participation for a few weeks. Why don't we work on this between now and our workshop in January? And why don't we talk about this as a particular item in our workshop in January as a group on that Friday? This is obviously something that it's going to make sense for us to put some rigor around, even though we haven't done so in the past. Does that work? Yeah. Cool. Everybody good with that one? Awesome. So we'll just take this up at a later time, and particularly in our workshop in January. All right, item number 12, Ordinance 16T41, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a budget adjustment to provide for new sidewalks and trails, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance. Good evening.
Good. We have matching outfits. She did get the memo, so we just want to let you all know. It's a united front. Council this evening talking about transportation alternatives. We had, you know this over. Is it working? Hang on a second. Slight technical difficulty. We want to show you the big picture of what we would like to do. There it goes. Back on October 27th, the Assistant Director for the Department, Lauren Schrum, had an opportunity to attend an Alamo Area Metropolitan Planning Organization workshop about transportation alternatives program offered up by the Federal Highway Administration. Great stuff. And specific to our desire is to build trails. That is the number one priority offered by the Parks Master Plan in 2014. It's also aligned with the Thoroughfare Master Plan of City of Schertz. And what we want to do is we want to take advantage of the possibility of acquiring additional funding outside of house, so to speak, to try to further those items. So when Lauren attended the workshop, she came back to me with some very, very interesting information. Most of which she was very excited because she thought it was a wonderful fit. As we reviewed the information that she was able to garner from that meeting, we said, yes, this is a great fit for the City of Schertz. It's something we would really like to aggressively pursue. Lauren is going to give you just a brief overview of what we would like to do. One of the things that was very interesting about the meeting that she attended was there are some very, very specific things that one must do in order to make that happen. And one of the things that we would have to do in order to even apply for the funding would be to have a $200,000 cash match in place. The Alamo Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, offers construction programs of $1 million minimum. So the city's match for that would need to be 20% of that or $200,000. So we would leverage that $800,000 out of that process. And so obviously we're thinking, well, now where would we come up with $200,000 to be able to do that? As Mr. Walters was explaining earlier this evening, there is a mechanism in place for us to do that by way of a budget adjustment through the ordinance process. But anyway, I would like for Ms. Schrum to give you kind of a brief overview of what these things will look like and what it would mean for the city.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So if you'll take a look at the map on the screen here, we just want to talk about this connection that we're trying to make here, which Chuck mentioned is part of our Parks and Trails Master Plan, and it is on the city's Master Thoroughfare Plan. So currently we have a hike and bike trail along Schertz Parkway on both sides. And then we are going to go and make a connection from Schertz Parkway over to Wiederstein Road along the existing LCRA easement that is there. Some years ago, Chuck already got permission from LCRA. We will firm up that agreement as part of this process, but we do have that already in place. It will connect to the existing green line there at the top, which is the trail through the Forest Ridge Park. And that goes all the way to the sidewalk at FM 3009. Then you would be able to come down south on the new FM 3009 sidewalks that are being installed currently, and you would come down to Live Oak Road. There is a sidewalk gap there along Live Oak Road on both sides. As you come back to the west, there's a few pieces there that have gone in with existing development, but there are several gaps there that development has already occurred, and so we will not be able to fill those gaps any other way besides through city funds or grant funds. So that would create this circuitous route here, and we would have a full loop right here in the heart of Schertz, not only for recreational use, but also for pedestrian traffic. Part of this program, it's called the Transportation Alternatives Program, funded by federal highway funds to provide alternatives to cars. So it's getting people in bikes and rollerblades, strollers, walking, getting to and from work, getting to and from the high school, the library, the campus, city campus. Part of the scoring process for this this application, filling sidewalk gaps is part of the criteria. Providing transportation alternatives near high demand pedestrian generators, which is exactly what we have here. So just a little bit more detail that shows you the LCRA easement there and how we're going to wind through the topography there in the wooded area. There's two lines there, a higher line and a lower line, and we'll weave out throughout there. That portion will be 10-foot wide decomposed granite, so it will match what we have already there in the Forest Ridge Park. Gives a little bit different feel, a little bit more recreational use. Runners really like the decomposed granite. And then the Live Oak section will be matching concrete sidewalks. So if there's a 5-foot sidewalk on one side, it's going to match that dimension. If it's 6 foot on the other, it'll match that dimension. And so that shows you there the gaps in the sidewalk. The solid line is current sidewalks, the dashed line is the gap. As part of this funding process, like Chuck mentioned, the match is $200,000 is our contribution. The federal match would be $800,000. The project calls are due January 16th, which is why we have the timing issue here, and we're trying to ask for permission to have that contribution to go forward in the process. And we would know in June whether we receive the federal funding or not. Currently, we're going through the cost estimate process. That's what we have to turn in at this point. So those are going on, and we will have more details later, obviously.
Just a couple of other things we'd like to mention. We also did some FaceTime with the TxDOT staff that administered the program, because it was highly recommended as part of the workshop that Lauren attended that this was a good idea. Go out and spend some FaceTime, get to know these people, introduce ourselves to them. We gave them a basic overview of what we were trying to do. They felt like it was an exact fit for their program and encouraged us strongly to proceed to go forward with it. So that's another reason why we're here this evening.
These would come from monies that are administered by the MPO?
Yes.
Cool. Council, questions for on this one, Mr. Larson?
Well, I actually have a comment. I want to thank you, just for the sake of everyone listening. People complain about government moving slowly, but you saw an opportunity to fit what already matches our plans, and to leverage our taxpayer dollars that are going to federal government, and to make that investment in Schertz. And January 16th deadline, I think everyone should know that's for the paperwork and the legwork that you have to do. That's intense. So I just want to applaud you for your efforts, for your passion. That's awesome that you saw an opportunity and jumped on it. And so I want to thank you for that, because in any industry that's rare. And I want to make sure that people here, whether you agree with this or not, you should note the go after it attitude, and that's impressive. So thank you.
Thank you.
Very good, Mr. Edwards.
I do have a question for you, Chuck. Chuck, is this an expansion or a revamping of the Safe Routes to Schools program, the streets program that we had a long time ago, one of the grant programs?
I'm not aware that it's a specific component of that. Okay. We see this as it ties into the park's master plan more than anything else, and about aligning with those things, being in alignment with this program that's being offered, it does have that ancillary benefit of offering that safe paths of travel for school children. It doesn't matter. The
Chuck?
traffic generator.
If I may, the Safe Routes to School is a separate funding program from this effort.
Okay. Thank you, Chuck.
I didn't know where the voice was coming from. I was looking.
That was
around.
great.
Thank you, Mr. James.
Rather frightened.
He was being sneaky.
Mr. Thompson?
As one who's familiar with the running community and hiking community, we have had people asking for this for a long time, especially now that the sidewalks on 3009 are coming close to completion. And I would move that we approve ordinance number 16T-41.
Second.
I had a motion from Mr. Thompson, and my right ear caught Mr. Larson as my second first. Not that my ears are perfect, but maybe because it's his proximity. Other comments, questions from council? 20 cents on the dollar is always a great deal for the city of Schertz. Well done. I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 I have 7 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. Thank you. Excellent work. The next item that we have on the agenda this evening is item number 13, which is Resolution 16R91, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing contracts with Lockwood Andrews and Newnham Incorporated, totaling no more than $150,000 for the design of the Cibolo Creek Bridge project and various separate and unrelated engineering services during the 2016-2017 fiscal year and other matters in connection therewith. Evening, sir.
Good evening. It's a common city practice to seek the authorization from council anytime we spend over $50,000 with any one company in the budget year. Staff wishes to contract with LAN Engineering for the following projects that are listed. We have several. We have the Cibolo Creek Bridge project for $71,640, which will be reimbursed at the end from Cibolo. We have the fire EMS old water separator for $20,000 and Oak Forest drainage for $5,800. And as the mayor mentioned, we put in a miscellaneous just in case something pops up throughout the year. Our goal is to seek council's permission to spend not to exceed amount of $150,000 with LAN Engineering for the 2016-2017 budget year. The funds are budgeted and available for the not to exceed amount for all the known projects as of now.
Very good. Questions, council?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 16R91 with one condition, that we're notified when the reimbursement from Cibolo is paid back.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Mr. Thompson. Comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. Thanks, sir. Item number 14 is next, Resolution 16R88, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with the City of Cibolo for the demolition and replacement of the bridge at Lower Seguin Road and the Cibolo Creek and other matters in connection therewith.
Okay, I'm here asking consideration or approval for interlocal agreement between the City of Schertz and the City of Cibolo. This is for the reconstruction of the Lower Seguin Road Bridge across the Cibolo Creek. City of Schertz has asked the City of Cibolo to enter into an agreement to share the cost of the bridge replacement. City staff has agreed to the terms, and the city staff would like to move forward with this agreement. Staff recommends approval of the attached resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into this interlocal agreement with the City of Cibolo for the bridge construction on Lower Seguin Road at Cibolo Creek.
Good, thank you, sir. Questions, council? If not, is there a motion to approve Resolution 16R94?
So moved,
Sorry,
Mr. Mayor.
16R88.
16R88, so moved.
A motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Mr. Larson. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I will call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. Thank you all. Item number 15, Resolution 16R94, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a revised City of Schertz investment policy and strategy.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council.
Per the Public Funds Investment Act of Texas, cities are required to submit a investment policy and strategy for council review and a reaffirmation every year. This policy was reviewed by the Investment Advisory Committee, and training from TML on the Public Funds Investment Act was actually held a week prior to the last committee meeting, where we reviewed and proposed changes to the policy from that committee. The policy you have is the revised policy, and I'm going to go through sort of the changes that was recommended by the committee for that policy. The majority of these changes were bookkeeping style, some changing some words. One of the things that come out of these trainings is they usually give some sample policies, and it's best practice to kind of look at, see what the recommendation is and what your policy has. Over time, I think our policy had become a little bit convoluted and had some duplicate language, so some of that language was clarified, simplified, and combined, trying to reduce the overall amount of pages that it had. And then it really clarified some terminology matching up from the Public Funds Investment Act to what we had stated directly in the policy. There were only two relatively large changes to the policy. One was part of the investment strategy, where we had authorized up to 5-year investments, so a maturity of no more than 5 years, as well as an target average weighted maturity of 4.5 years. So if we took all of our investments and the time it takes for them to mature and we get our money back, the average would be 4.5 years. And if our maximum allowed is 5 years, you could see how that weighted disproportionately, and we did not actually meet that target. The change in the document is to have a maximum life right now of 3 years, and then have an average maturity of 1 year or less as the target. This is appropriate in the current market. Because of rising interest rates, you do want to take a shorter position so that your investments mature faster and you reinvest in it at a higher rate, rather than locking in a low rate for a longer period of time. If it was a high interest rate time period or scenario, much like it was back in 2008, we would try to go further out on that curve so we could lock in those higher returns for a longer period. So I will go through some generalized changes through the policy. We'll go real quick, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. One of the changes we had was it kept referencing the city manager and his designee. The majority of those references were changed to the city manager, the finance director, and the investment officers, or the other investment officers. That's to include and recognize the Public Funds Investment Act, or PFIA, identification of an investment officer. Moving forward. Again, this was the city manager, finance director, and investment officers. The principal idea of the Public Funds Investment Act is that it's taxpayers' funds, and we don't want to take on a lot of risk, so the primary concern is safety in our investments. Safety is really the best word for it, because it inherently includes liquidity and diversification, which are two other main points. So if you're safe, then you're already pretty liquid, which means you're able to take cash out of your investments fairly easy, and you're diversified. So if one portion of your investments ends up failing, you don't have everything in one basket. You're able to continue on. It minimizes the impact of any negative occurrence in the market. Sort of last on that list, then, our priority is our yield, or our return. So we look at safety and liquidity and diversification first, and then we try to maximize our yield. One area that we changed, we had a separate section for maturity. However, this was basically a duplicate language seen in the investment strategy. So what we did, we took out one whole section and then put it down in the investment strategy portion, and then added and changed that 3-year and 5-year seen prior to the 3-year maximum and less than 1 year area. investment responsibility. The city's investment officer was just changed. It says delegates, but that's not the language seen in the Public Funds Investment Act, so we wanted to change that to match the actual act. And then just talked about who's designated as an investment officer. It includes the city manager, it includes the finance director, and it includes the members of the investment advisory committee. Again, more of the same change. Instead of city manager, it would be responsible of the city manager, finance director, and the public information, or the investment officers. Again, same piece. And then this determining cash available for investment was pretty much the same as developing cash flow projections. It's the same process, so why don't we have two sections? So if we're determining cash flow projections, the end product of that was, of course, determining how much money we actually have for investing. So we took out this section and added one sentence at the end to encompass both sections. We had some more changes on the designee language throughout this area. Again, more changes on the designee to investment officers. Investment officer changes, investment officer changes. Investment officer changes. Again, more on investment training. Investment officer changes. Here on the investment instruments, the Public Funds Investment Act does dictate what investments that cities or municipalities or local governments are allowed to even invest in. The city can take on even stricter terms if it so wishes in its investment policy. Looking back here, we did have duplicate entries as far as what's allowed. We kept mentioning directive obligations of a state or agencies, and then right below it, other obligations guaranteed or insured by full credit of the state of Texas. Again, it's the same language, just stated differently. So our deal was to try to reduce duplicate language and entries to clarify and make it simpler and still leave us up to invest in I'm sorry, I even realized I wasn't even showing you everything. One piece we did add, commercial paper, we're allowed to invest in commercial grade commercial paper. It's A1P1 certified, which is a highest tier commercial paper. And commercial paper is a very short-term investment from corporations, usually used to fund day-to-day operations. The Public Funds Investment Act allows us to go up to 270 days on the maturity of the commercial paper. It was recommended at the training that we don't go over 90 days. Commercial paper is, while it's high grade, if the company goes bankrupt or turns sour, that's the last to get paid out. So basically, we lose all the funds that we have invested in commercial paper. We said if we go over the 90 days recommended in training, we would have to do monthly credit checks on the companies, and if the credit check turned sour, we would then remove ourselves from the investment quickly. That was the only change on that section. And again, and then 10 and 11 mention about bond proceeds. Bond proceeds are not governed by the investment policy. The bond proceeds are how they are invested are actually dictated in the bond covenant itself. So the bond language tells us how those can be invested or what they should be invested in. So 10 and 11 were actually duplicate entries. While the investment policy does not govern them, I did want to leave a section on bond proceeds in the investment policy just for information, so we have all investment information in one spot, in case anyone was looking or asking. Investment institutions, it gave investment institutions defined, however, that list was either included in the previous section under allowed investments or is included in the next section where it says selection of banks and security dealers. So we went ahead and removed that section as well. Under that selection of security banks and security dealers, the only non-clarification that we had was under a broker dealer must provide a complete questionnaire furnished by the city manager. But however, that does not mirror our current practice, and we do not have a questionnaire to give them. If we do select a bank or commercial dealer, our practice is to give them a copy of our investment policy. which they will then certify that they have read and will try in their fullest extent to abide by those requests. If we see that they've made an investment not in line with that, we'll call them up, and they will either reverse that, get out of it as soon as they can, and we will may or may not then use them in the future. But and I believe that was all of the changes that we had proposed for this round of the investment policy and strategy. Is there any particular questions or sections of the document that you would like me to go over?
Mr. Crawford?
One quick one. Is there a requirement and or do we check the credentials of somebody that we deal with to make sure that they are licensed by the SEC or whatever the organization is? Do we go down to that kind of detail to make sure that an individual we actually deal with is certified, and should that be done? Just curious.
If we do check to make sure if they're a certified broker dealer. All the other investments we have, local government pools or banks or CDs, we don't have to go through, let's say, a broker for. But each of those are created under, like the local government investment pools are created for the purpose of local governments to invest in. So they follow the PFIA to its extent on those guys.
Thank you.
Mr. Thompson?
I just want to comment that I went through the training that Mr. Walters referred to, and I took a number of questions during the 10 hours of presentation. And in the ride back and forth, I asked those questions, and everyone was able to be answered far more than my satisfaction. And the one that probably impressed me the most was I asked on a percentage basis, using all the best practices that were presented in the seminar, where are we at with our investment policy? And the answer came back that we are 90% or over the best practice, and that the few that were not being followed were just more preference. And so I came away from that seminar very impressed with not only what our city is doing, but very confident that the strategy is excellent, and therefore I would approve resolution number 16-R-94.
Second.
A motion to approve resolution 16R94 and a second. Motion for Mr. Thompson, second for Mr. Edwards. Council, other comments, questions? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes and no nays, motion carries. Thank you, sir. Next item I have on the agenda is Ordinance 16T43, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement for the purchase of one fire apparatus and associated equipment and adjust the fiscal year 2016-17 budget, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, declaring an emergency, and providing an effective date. Chief, how are you this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Thank you for your time. We're bringing to you tonight the new engine for Station 3. I know there's been some discussion about that, lots of items coming up. So that's something that we would just like to talk to you kind of about that process and how that goes a little bit. It may sound strange or to think that it takes that long to build a fire truck, but it actually takes about as long to get the fire truck as it does to build the station. And we definitely don't want to take a chance on having the station done before we have the fire truck ready. So this process started probably back in September. A committee of firemen come together. We kind of discuss the needs of that section of town where it's going. We kind of go out and look at that area, any challenges that we would face in that area. Is it more residential? Is it more highway? Is it a combination of both? And so that's kind of how that process starts of putting that fire engine together. That's kind of went on throughout November with a lot of meetings with the Siddons and Martin group that does the Pierce manufacturing. And we're here now just kind of at the completion of that project. We've got all those specs in, and we've got everything ready to turn in and move forward with that. So I was just going to see if there's any questions on that. trying to move forward with that, and that will be engine 3.
Questions for Chief? Mr. Gutierrez?
Just one question. Were you able to get everything you needed on that truck? On the
Yes,
apparatus?
we feel very good about all the equipment that we have on this fire engine, and all the lighting. We've put a lot of extra lighting on it to cover out on I-10 and then the dark areas out there.
All right, great.
Other questions for Chief?
Yes, sir. What type of
Davis?
truck are we, what type of truck are we talking about? Is this a straight pumper?
Yes, this is a puck pumper, quantum puck pumper.
Do we feel we have any kind of need for any other specialized apparatus out there with Corbett being out there, and then the charter school that's out there? Do we feel any kind of a need for an aerial or any kind of a quint, something that's going to provide the ability to cover those larger structures, with the understanding that we're looking at a station down there on the south side because of the railroad track problem and the continuous inability to maybe get there in a timely manner. Is that not something that we maybe should address? Or is there a possibility to realign trucks and put the general pumper on this side and put something else with a higher capability?
It's a really good point. We buy different apparatus for the primary response area. The primary response area out there is, puts us in a little bit of a quandary there because we can't get too large. There's some areas that even to get down the lanes to the houses, we want to make sure that we can get the engine in there. An aerial would have been tough for 100% response. We can bring the aerial from downtown. Also, this engine, we put an extra capacity of water tank on it as well because it's further away from the sport. But we wish we had the ladders everywhere, but we'll get ladders coming from the Quint out of one, and also if we need to special bring in a ladder, we can bring in Converse ladder or another platform.
All right, any other questions on this one?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 16T43.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Mr. Thompson. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes, no nays, the motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, next thing we have on the agenda this evening, we have a roll call vote confirmation. We have a few votes we've taken this evening.
Items 1 through 4, the consent items. Motion made by Councilmember Davis, seconded by Councilmember Kaiser. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Lawrence, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 5, resolution number 16R95. Motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Larson. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Councilmember Davis voted no. Councilmember Gutierrez voted yes. Larson voted yes. Thompson voted yes. Kaiser voted yes. Councilmember Crawford voted no. Motion passed. Item number 6, ordinance number 16S42, first and final reading. Motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Thompson. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, and Crawford voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 7, ordinance number 16T44, first and final reading. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards made the motion, seconded by Councilmember Crawford. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 8, resolution number 16R96. Motion was made by Councilmember Thompson, seconded by Councilmember Kaiser. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, and Crawford voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 9, Resolution 16R93. Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 10, resignations and appointments to the various city boards and commissions as presented by staff. Motion was made by Mayor Carpenter, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Council members Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, and Crawford voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 11, no action was taken. Item number 12, ordinance number 16T41, first reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Thompson, seconded by Councilmember Larson. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Council members Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, and Crawford voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 13, Resolution 16R91, with the condition that council is notified when the portion from Cibolo is paid back. Motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Thompson. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Council members Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, and Crawford voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 14, resolution number 16R88. Motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, seconded by Council member Larson. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Council members Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, and Crawford voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 15, resolution number 16R94. Motion was made by Councilmember Thompson, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Council members Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, and Crawford voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 16, ordinance number 16T43, first and final reading. Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Thompson. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Council members Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, and Crawford voted yes. Motion passed.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item we have on the agenda, item 17, announcements by the city manager. Mr. Kessel, anything further this evening? Nothing further. Item number 18, future agenda item requests for the city council. Anything that we need to add that we don't already have scheduled? Mr. Larson and then Dr. Kaiser. Mr. Larson?
I just want to second, we touched on this earlier, but maybe a conversation within council on a policy level regarding the hotel occupancy and tax fund and the philosophy for the usage of that. And specifically, I'd like the conversation to be wide-ranging with an opportunity for new and creative ideas, maybe just kind of the baseline conversation, if that makes sense.
Good, you got that? Okay, Mr. Kessel's got it. Dr. Kaiser?
If we could get some information on what is actually happening out in Sedona. I have visited out there and seen some of the issues as far as some of the houses, really the yards are collapsing. And so I don't know if that's an issue with the developer, with the city, but if we could get some information on that, I would appreciate it.
So is that then something that you want brought as a briefing, as an agenda item, or do you just want information sent to the council?
I'd like a briefing.
Okay, so it will be an agenda item then, okay? Anyone else?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Crawford?
Ryan, I talked to Dudley earlier today. Could we get a brief about the piece of Sedona that talks about the package plant and what you and I talked about and Dudley and I talked about, so that the council knows, because that's reasonably important with what Mr. Price is doing and other folks. Thank you.
Could that say that I couldn't quite hear?
I couldn't hear either. I couldn't hear you.
Okay.
Mr. James, did you capture that? Would you tell us what we're going to make sure?
I was asking
say it
Brian
for-
if we could get a
Well, I'm going to
brief.
have him say it back to you, so make sure he's got it right, if that's all right. How did you?
Yes, sir. Yeah, Councilman Crawford would like a briefing on the status and issues surrounding the Sedona batch plant and the expansion thereof.
Did you get it correct, Mr. Crawford?
Yes,
Perfect.
sir, he did.
Awesome. Anyone else? All right, I'm going to move on to item number 19, announcements by the mayor and council members, and I'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Edwards.
I have nothing, sir.
Mr. Davis.
Nothing, sir.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Happy holidays. That's all I have.
Awesome. Mr. Larson.
Nothing.
Mr. Thompson.
Nothing.
Dr. Kaiser.
I have nothing.
Mr.
I'm going
Crawford.
to slow you down. I have a couple of things.
Sure.
Mr. Gutierrez and I went to the ACOG legal meeting on Friday morning last week. Had 3 members and 1 attorney to talk to for 3 hours, which was very, very good. And I went to Tavy Murphy's retirement ceremony on Sunday afternoon in Seguin. And Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to everybody else.
Very good. Thank you. I would like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year, and offer a quote from the late 1770s as our country was founded. May agriculture flourish and may commerce fill our purses. And with that, we stand adjourned.